Hey there everyone, Joel again for Joel Reads Comics, back again with another supercut, and oh boy, is this a special one. This is a meaty one, again, getting all hyped for the upcoming Superman movies. We got the Supergirl one coming out, we got Man of Tomorrow, and I thought, now would be the perfect time to revisit probably one of the most important Superman runs, at least of the last decade and some change. Of course, I'm talking about Peter J. Tomasi and Patrick Gleason's DC Rebirth Superman this series. This one ran from 2016 to 2018. This is a really important series. To me and my growth as a comic book YouTuber and an editor, I covered this one, from beginning to end. I think this was the very first Superman series that I covered from beginning to end, and I think, it really not only holds up, but there are so many important stories in this one. This is where Jonathan Kent, the Superboy, really starts coming in to his own. You got Superman Reborn that fused the old 52 and new 52 Superman together into one being, cleaned up a lot of continuity issues. We got Super Sons of Tomorrow in here. That's another big crossover storyline. In fact, as I was putting this together, I always like to use the official omnibus as kind of like, a framework for putting together these videos. And I can tell you that this video will actually end up being longer than the official omnibus. I think there's like 2 volumes in here that Tomasi and company didn't actually write, Sinestro one, and I think a Superman on Apocalypse one. So this is going to actually be longer. You're going to actually be getting more story here, more bang for your buck. So yeah, some classic stories in here, some pretty infamous ones here too, some ones that the creators came out later and said that they didn't quite enjoy working on and that aged like milk. Of course, I'm talking about the, Superman family in a little 2-parter, take a road trip across America in 2016-2017. Talked about how good and how great everything is, which, God, I remember covering this one even as a Canadian. I tried to be really nice because I think it came out around July 4th, this issue, but in the back of my mind, I'm like, things aren't really good. And I don't think they're going to get much better, but, I want to be nice to this issue. That's one of the few times where, as a critic, where if I could actually walk back some criticism, I would have walked back the criticism on that one. But hey, that's just one story. The rest of this is all great stuff from start to finish. I'm going to stop hot-dogging and grandstanding. Let's get to it.
So as the comic opens, Superman goes to the grave of his counterpart on this Earth, a man who was a younger version of himself. Superman mourns the loss of a person who he felt such a close kinship to, despite the fact that he didn't know him for very long. He does, however, swear that as long as he's around, he will continue to uphold the value set by that Superman, and that the light of Superman shall forever be known throughout the DC universe. Of course, that's just Superman at work, and if you want to see that story told in more detail, then you should check out Action Comics. This is Superman, and the marching order for this book is to be more about Superman at home. Here, in an interesting and surprising twist, the focus actually changes from Clark himself over to Jonathan, formerly Jonathan White, now Jonathan Smith. Yes, the family is moved somewhere different now, and as such, they've taken a different surname. What's cool about this is it means we essentially get to see Superman take the role of Pa Kent, trying to, pass on a bunch of life-affirming lessons to his son, who is right now struggling with his ever-emerging superpowers, so much to the point that when a bird picks up his pet cat, he kind of explodes at the bird with heat vision. And yeah, he gets the cat away from the bird, but it's real messy. Actually, I was shocked at how graphic and gory this scene was, so much to the point that I'm not going to show it to you. That's how hardcore and startling it actually was. To make matters even worse for poor Jonathan, he was seen using his superpowers out in the open by the little girl who is the daughter of the dairy owner from across the way. Later that night, tensions boil over at the dinner table, and Clark and Jonathan end up getting into a fight. You might be Superman, but that doesn't always mean you're gonna be super dad. Later that same night, Batman and Wonder Woman come to the farm and start asking a bunch of questions to Superman. What's interesting is that, again, we see this through the eyes of Jonathan Kent, who's peeking out through his window trying to make out as much of the conversation as he can. But much to his chagrin, he only picks up bits and pieces. I guess if we want to see more of the Trinity growing closer together, we're going to have to read the actual Trinity book when that comes out. This comic, however, ends with Superman coming to his son's room saying to get dressed because he's ready to go on a mission with them. Alrighty then, so as the comic opens up, we can see Clark and his son Jonathan are on their way for a little take your son to work day time, only you know, when your dad's job is Superman. It seems that a ship carrying some volatile materials has run aground in the Arctic. Oh no, not that ship, it was carrying the hot pants, not the hot pants. Superman manages to save the crew aboard the ship. Unfortunately, what crashed the ship wasn't anything of this world, it was something rather Cthulhuian with a bunch of tentacles. Wow, and when you look at this horrible squid creature against the night sky full of stars, I cannot help but feel some very Watchmen-esque vibes. Superman does everything he can to grapple with the creature while Jonathan looks on from afar. It's at this point Dad says, you know what son, you could maybe help out just a little bit, you have heat vision. Of course, Jonathan is still super gun-shy about using his powers, especially heat vision, after he accidentally killed the cat last issue. That being said, to save his father from a squid-related death, Jonathan opens up and lets the creature have it with both barrels, even though he burns his dad a little bit in the process, Kryptonian heat vision being one of the few things that can actually hurt Superman, it seems. Also, hey, what a cool new look for Jonathan, as he got himself his own Superman shirt from a thrift shop. Macklemore would be oh so proud right now, wouldn't he? Superman tells his son that if he's going to wear that S, then he really has to mean it. It's a responsibility, but more than that, it's his legacy. It's something that he will one day inherit from his own father, because, you know, Supergirl, I guess, isn't worthy, and, you know, Con-El and Connor can't, they're just kind of in the wind right now, so it's all up to you, son. It's in this sweet father-son Kodak moment Jonathan decides to come clean with his dad about what happened to the cat. Superman always knew. Again, with his super senses, he can tell the change in atmosphere every time someone uses Kryptonian heat vision, but he was waiting to see if his son was willing to come clean about it, and he did. And with this show of honesty, it's clear that Jonathan is already set on the right path to being a hero in his own right. Later that same day, the family has a funeral for the cat. Yep, it looks like the day is saved and there's a nice bow on all these events, well, except for one hanging thread, that is the little girl from the next farm over who saw Jonathan use his powers in the first place. She says that his secret is safe with him because, you know, she trusts him, he seems like a good person. And then the weirdest thing happens. Jonathan falls out of the tree the two were sitting in and he hurts himself, like gets a serious concussion, even though he shouldn't because we've already seen him walk through fire and exhibit a bunch of Superman-level powers. What possibly could be interfering with his Kryptonian abilities? Well, maybe it has something to do with what's going on at the Fortress of Solitude right now, as the Eradicator, the old character from the reign of the Superman with his sweet-ass Bret Hart shades, is claiming that he will save the boy, or, you know, kill him, whichever comes first. Alrighty then, so as the comic opens, Clark and Lois are taking their injured son Jonathan to the Fortress of Solitude. They're concerned because for some reason his superpowers have been on the fritz lately, going in and out with no real rhyme or reason, and they're hoping that the secret to unlocking why could be at the old Superman's fortress. Superman says the only reason he hasn't set up shop here is because he feels a little strange invading the space of this world Superman. Unfortunately though, he's gonna have to get over those feelings right quick because they're not the only one at the fortress. The Eradicator is also there. Now, being the older, more mature Superman that we're dealing with here, our guy pretty much figures out who the Eradicator is right away and thinks to himself, if he's anything like the Eradicator from his Earth, then he's probably bad news. This leads to an absolutely awesome fight wherein I love the panel execution here with it all jetting out all over the place. It's really frenetic. Also, may I compliment the Bret Hart shades on the Eradicator? I love that those haven't changed in all these years. The two fight for so long and so hard they end up crumbling the fortress all around them, only here's the thing though, when Lois and Jonathan are put in danger, Eradicator goes out of his way to save them. So yeah, the crazy metal man turns out to be not so bad at all, but what's his deal? Well, I'm glad you asked, because he gives his origin in this issue as well. The Eradicators, as we find out, were a group of robots created by none other than General Zod to hunt down the most dangerous Kryptonian criminals. These super advanced machine life forms were equipped with weapons that would allow them to quite literally suck the soul out of an enemy's body for deposit later in the Phantom Zone. And because a bunch of them were off-planet doing the will of Zod, they were also some of the only beings in the universe to see the actual destruction of Krypton. With Zod dead and their robot prime directive gone, the Eradicators, or Eradicators singular in this case, needed to find new meaning in life, and that is protecting Krypton. In this very particular case, protecting the propagation of the Kryptonian race, and that would mean Jonathan. The Eradicator diagnoses right away that the problem with Jonathan's powers right now are his, get this, defective human genes. Geez, I don't know, man, it's his torn denim jeans that I'm more worried about. Ho ho ho, waka waka. Eradicator says that he'll fix the boy's DNA at any cost, and it's at this point right here I'm going to tell you, if you don't want something huge spoiled for you, skip ahead to the end when I give my score, because something crazy happens and I want to give you a chance to get out right now. Okay, you out now? Good. You see, when the Eradicator motions to blast young Jonathan, Krypto, the super dog, ends up jumping in front of him, shielding him from the blast. In doing so, killing him. Yes, that's right, they killed Krypto, the superdog, and even though Jonathan didn't know him all that well, it's clear that thematically his brain is drawing comparisons to this dead dog and the dead cat from before. This turn of events absolutely and utterly guts poor Jonathan, who cries through his heat vision as the comic ends. Alright then, so picking up from where the last issue left off, the evil mechanical man that is the Eradicator was trying to cleanse young Jonathan White of his human half. Superdad understandably takes a huge offense to this, and a massive fight breaks out between the two. Obviously, young Jonathan is still reeling from the death of Krypto, but more than that, the feelings it stirs up in him over the death of the cat from a couple issues ago of which he was responsible. His mom, Lois, basically tells him he can continue to sit here and feel bad about himself, or he can get on in there, bring honor to that S, and help out his father, which he does. And it's pretty damn great when he joins the fight too. They punch the Eradicator in tandem, and all I could think of was that great Goku Gohan father-son Kamehameha moment, but done with Superman. And it's at this point right here the book, in the best way possible, goes freaking insane. You see, we travel from the Fortress of Solitude to Bibbo Bobowski's bar. Now, some of you younger fans out there probably have no idea who Bibbo is. I'll just put it this way. Imagine if Popeye was awesome and the biggest Superman fan ever. Bibbo wins what he thinks is a moon rock in an arm wrestling contest, only it turns out to be an inert piece of kryptonite, and the Eradicator, who is all obsessed with restarting Krypton, gets drawn to it, and because of that, the Superman family gets drawn there too. This is also where Eradicator drops a major story bomb. You see, you remember in the last episode we found out that the Eradicators actually witnessed the destruction of Krypton. Well, using their powers to absorb souls, they absorbed all the dead souls of Krypton inside of them, which means this one Eradicator basically has an entire planet's worth of dead people inside of him right now, and they are angry and begging to get out. Superman takes a major hit in the fight and ends up having a hallucination wherein he talks to his deceased father, Pa Kent. Keep in mind too, this isn't the new 52 Pa Kent, this is the original Pa Kent giving old-timey Pa Kent advice. He talks about how the dead ultimately only want to rest in peace, and that to show these souls of Krypton what for, Superman should put them at ease by telling them that the spirit of Krypton will be carried on through him and his son, and he does. Eradicator does not like this, calling back all the souls, making it so they can't rest. Now, it's at this point Superman has to get clever. He puts his family inside a submarine and flies them up to the moon. Alright, so as we join the comic, Superman has taken Lois and his son up to the moon in hopes of getting the fight with the Eradicator away from the city. Now, this whole arc is really focused on Superman as a father, and he uses this as a real teaching opportunity with his son. Why Superman even goes so far as to quote Sun Tzu's Art of War, showing that, you know, even though he has all this amazing power, he still thinks tactically. Now, where on the moon could Superman possibly be taking his family, you might be asking yourself? Well, it's to Batman's secret bat cave on the moon, of course, and I mean, really, are you shocked that he has one of those? I bet Batman has a bat cave everywhere. There's probably a bat cave at the bottom of the ocean. There's probably a bat cave on the top of the CN Tower. If they ever find the lost city of gold, El Dorado, don't be shocked if there's a 14-carat bat cave waiting for them there. Now, the Eradicator is a fierce, unrelenting opponent, not unlike a Terminator. The thing is, though, is that Superman feels he kind of has to hold back his punches in this fight because the Eradicator also carries with him the souls of dead Krypton, and Superman doesn't want to hurt all these innocent ghosts. It's because of this the Eradicator and his Bret Hart shades manage to momentarily get a leg up on Superman and suck him into the big ghost matrix that he keeps inside of him. With the Man of Steel dealt with, that means the Eradicator can finally move back ahead with his original plan, and that was to remove the human half of Jonathan White. Too bad removing his human half would mean killing him. For a second there, the comic turns into a horror movie where Jonathan is doing everything he can to run and hide from the Eradicator. The interesting thing, though, is he doesn't have to hide for much longer because help comes in the form of his mother, Lois, who donned Batman's Hellbat armor. Oh man, that is such a cool story pull. If you'll remember, Tomasi, the guy who's writing this book, invented the Hellbat armor for Batman back when he had to go rescue his son from Apocalypse. And now Lois is using the suit's power to check challenge the Eradicator all Ripley and Alien style. It's so freaking good. We already got to see what happens when Superman and Son do a double team on a bad guy, and now it's a mother-son double team of pain this time around. Meanwhile, inside the Eradicator, Superman desperately tries to reason with the dead spirits of Krypton inside the Eradicator, saying that they'll never live free if they're trapped inside of him, and that if they can somehow give him their power, he'll not only be able to escape, but free them as well. This ghostly energy proves to be exactly what Superman needed to burst from the Eradicator's body and turn the tide of battle just as the comic ends. Alright then, so as the comic opens, Superman, who has been empowered by all the Kryptonian spirits that were being housed inside the Eradicator, bursts forth to defend his wife and son. It's a brutal, no-holds-barred affair where Superman throws absolutely everything he has at this mechanical monster. But by far the craziest part is that the Eradicator still talks smack even while getting his head kicked in. He talks about how Superman is shaming the memory of Krypton, and only with the Eradicator's help can the House of El and indeed all the spirits of Krypton finally be at peace. Now, as we found out earlier on, the Eradicator only runs on soul power, and so far he only has one soul left inside of him, which Superman decides it's high time to rip out. Who does that soul belong to? Well, Krypto the super dog, of course. Hey, he's back, everybody. The pupper lives. Even with his dying breath, though, the Eradicator still manages to be incredibly salty towards Superman and his new family, saying that this young boy will be the ruin of the Kryptonian race, this half-breed, this mongrel. Superman says that the legacy of Krypton, for better or worse, is up for his son to decide now, and the souls of Krypton agree, forming the House of El symbol up in the sky before they themselves disappear. Wow, that's a pretty ringing endorsement, wouldn't you agree? Now, here's the thing, the fight that Superman had with the Eradicator was so big and so loud, people on Earth have started to take notice. In fact, all the news media is now looking at the moon right now. Superman decides to take this opportunity to finally reveal himself to the world once and for all, and he does so by standing in front of Apollo 11 with the American flag blowing in the background like that oh-so classic and legendary image of Superman that we all know. What's really great and furthermore interesting about this moment is that everyone on Earth celebrates Superman, not the return of Superman, mind you. As far as they know, this guy is still the Superman that they remember, just, you know, a lot older for whatever reason. It's kind of like a torch passing, only not really, because they're technically passing the torch back to the older Superman from the younger Superman. Is there a word for that? There should be. Later, Superman even gets celebrated in Metropolis. They give him a huge parade, they give him a key to the city. It's everything that the New 52 era of Superman was sorely missing. A Superman who loves everyone and is loved in return. But just because he's being celebrated as a hero doesn't mean Clark forgets his obligations as a father. In fact, this marks a great turning point in his son's career as a superpowered individual, because Clark decides to give Jonathan his first pair of nerd glasses. Why? Because he's starting school soon and he's going to have to learn how to not stick out with his amazing abilities. Oh sure, Jonathan thinks it's lame and cumbersome now, but those glasses have gotten his old man out of a lot of jams. Oh, but the surprises don't end there. To bookend the issue, Superman decides to take his son to meet the rest of the Trinity, introducing him as the new Superboy. And somewhere Connor Kent is like, hey, I thought that was my name. Alright, so as the comic opens, we can see Superman is flying around the world and seeing to the business of, well, being Superman, you know, inspiring truth and justice, fighting the good fight, that sort of thing. But those aren't the only responsibilities Clark has to deal with these days. He's a father, he has a family, and right now the Hamilton County Fair is coming up. Lois and Jonathan pretty much assumed that he wouldn't be able to make it because he'd be too busy, well, you know, doing Superman stuff, but he decides that he's going to do it. In fact, he's so serious about making this a family day out, he even hands Lois over his cape to prove that he will be doing no Supermaning at this event. You know what, as someone who grew up in a rural town myself and went to many fairs just like this one, I gotta say Tomasi nails this sort of feeling really good. The fair also serves as a great opportunity to introduce us to some new characters in Hamilton County. There's the little girl who lives in the dairy farm across the way, of whom Jonathan had already sort of made friends with. There's his new science teacher, who seems to be an important enough character that they give him a really long introduction production. And then there's the town meth heads who are attempting to steal the ticket tag. Oh yeah, that's right, meth heads are trying to steal the tag. Well, it is the country after all. Now, here's the amazing part. Superman can hear these guys planning the crime in the background. He can hear it, but he knows he can't do anything about it without breaking his promise. And because Superman is so good, so moral, and so upstanding, this is actually causing him quite a bit of distress. Oh, what do I do? Do I continue to schmooze and keep my cover as a good husband and father, or do I try and do something about this even though I have no costume? Things come to a major head when moments before the robbery is about to go down, Jonathan wants to ride the roller coaster, the last one of the night. Of course, they do call him Superman for a reason, and in the blink of an eye, he is able to stop the robbery with the help of a costume shop that was nearby, and still manage to make it just in time to ride the roller coaster with Jonathan and Lois, even though in the background, Lois can hear everything going on. She's not mad or anything, but as the roller coaster reaches its absolute zenith, this is the perfect time to let loose with "Aha, told you so." Okay, so this issue, whether you knew it or not, is actually a tribute issue to the dearly departed Darwin Cooke, a legend in his field of both art and writing. The story finds Jonathan, Superman's son, working on his science fair project inside the Fortress of Solitude. It's a drone, well, technically more of a flying saucer, but whatever it is, it ends up interfacing with the fortress's crystal technology. This malfunction ends up causing a crazy portal to be opened up, and Superman and Superboy getting themselves transported to Dinosaur Island, a awesome place from DC lore that was featured quite prominently in Darwin Cooke's own New Frontier. In fact, this whole story has this really great golden age vibe to it, and not just because the island itself is stocked with a bunch of World War II artifacts. Superman and his son are unrepairably stuck right now, and until they can find that drone piece, they might not be able to get home, especially as the island has some sort of fog that dampens their powers and keeps them from getting too far. You know what else is a problem with this island? Literally everything on it is trying to kill you. There's giant fish that swallow Superman and his son whole before Superman can punch the fish's heart and let them out. So yeah, looks like they won't be swimming out anytime soon. There's giant pterodactyls that scoop up and try and eat Krypto the superdog, which is kind of becoming an on-running gag in this book that everything is trying to kill the poor pupper. With flying now officially out, the two super folks decide to explore the island a little more. They find an old World War II outpost wherein someone was getting ready for a huge battle that never actually came. But moreover than that, they find an entire story scrawled on the wall belonging to the military outfit called the Losers. Oh wow, that's a great callback to World War II DC Comics. The Losers were an actual World War II team from that era in comics. They would also get rebooted into a modern day era, and they made a pretty forgettable movie about them, but this is the real deal, guys. What was their story of the island? Well, we'll find that out in the next issue. Alright then, so picking up from where the last issue left off, Superman and Superboy are in the cave wherein the Losers made their last stand on Dinosaur Island. Only here's the thing, not all the Losers are gone, as they run into the famous Captain Storm, who, may I remind you out there, is an actual World War II comic era character from comics that were printed while World War II was actually going on. Superman and Son let Storm know that they're not the bad guys. Moreover than that, they tell him, hey GI, the war is over and the good guys won, you don't gotta worry. Now of course comes the hard part of the operation, and that is getting these two super people back home, which is going to be easier said than done, because the science MacGuffin Superman and Superboy need to get back is all the way on the other side of the island. We actually end up getting a really effective panel wherein Jonathan ends up breaking down and starts crying because he thinks his mother Lois is going to be angry at them for being gone so long. Superman comforts him by saying, wow, you know kid, you've been so brave throughout this whole thing, I honestly forgot that you're 10 years old. Beyond that though, Superboy doesn't have to worry because crazy shit like this happens to his father Superman pretty much all the time. To make the long trek across the dangerous Dinosaur Island, Superman and Superboy decide to gift Captain Storm with a brand new wooden leg. This is a great moment too because in just a few speech bubbles he gets the reader pretty much up to date on the entirety of his origin story, how he lost his leg, how he was a U-boat captain, etc, etc. Now Superman and Superboy can fly, but how is Captain Storm going to make it to the other side of the island? Well, trained pterodactyl of course. Yeah, this dude has really been on the island that long. He's trained and named a pterodactyl. This might be the coolest image ever. And you know what? I want you all to remember this panel the next time someone tells you Golden Age war comics are stupid or lame. You remind them of Captain Pterodactyl riding Storm. When our heroes reach the other side of the island, they can see that their trinket that's going to get them home and its power source have been taken by a giant albino gorilla. gorilla. These science MacGuffins also seem to give him the power to control the other monsters on the island. Why? Don't ask those questions, just enjoy watching Superman punch an albino gorilla. In the end, Superman and Superboy manage to grab the device and start the process to return home. They want Captain Storm to come with them, but he decides to stay here, saying that for him the war is over and that the world beyond this island has changed. But he knows he did a good deed helping Superman and Superboy get home. Now that is a hero, everybody. Okay then, so as we join the comic, it's Christmas time in Hamilton County. Oh man, come on, comic industry, Christmas already? We were just done Halloween. I've had it up to here with this holiday cluster. It's a pretty normal day, one like any other for young Jonathan. However, he does run into a rather familiar face, Maya, who we'll all know as the superhero Nobody, a supporting character from the old Damian Son of Batman book. It seems that Nobody has been sent in by her old friend Robin to keep some close tabs on the young Superboy. Jonathan's not an idiot though. He eventually does realize he's being tracked and forces Nobody and Goliath, Damian's pet giant bat monster, out into the open. Once again, we get to closely see how tied the young Superboy's powers are to his emotions. He accidentally starts a forest fire when he gets surprised, and then when he gets a sneeze, he ends up activating his ice breath. Geez, I wonder if the kid is gonna one day start manifesting those weird Superman powers like telepathy and telekinesis, self-duplication. Heck, what about that solar flare that got the New 52 Superman and all that trouble? Is that a power he could one day get? Jonathan gets knocked out and brought before Damian in the Batcave. It seems that Damian has been keeping a tab on all the correspondence between his father, Batman, and the Justice League on the nature of the Superboy, and while the adults may very well have given Superboy a pass, he hasn't passed the Damian test. In fact, Damian's issues with Superboy are a nice childlike microcosm of all the problems Superman and Batman have always had with one another. He's too reckless, he can't be trusted, look at all the things he's already done if we don't stop him now. When Superman realizes that his son is missing, you can only imagine he's fire and brimstone about the whole thing. Funny, he jumps the gun and assumes that this is Bruce doing this, not Damian. Granted, everyone calms down once they realize that this was Damian's doing and it was more of a misunderstanding between kids than it was anything else. In fact, this all leads to a really adorable moment wherein everyone sits around and Alfred gives Superboy a root beer. Aww. Once again, you get the really sweet feeling of Batman and Superman bonding like never before over being fathers. While the Dark Knight and the Man of Steel talk shop, Alfred says, "Oh hey Master Damian, why don't you go show Superboy your animal collection? You have ever so many." And like the petulant brat he sometimes is, Damian is resistant against the whole thing. In fact, he takes this opportunity to kind of insult Superboy to his face over the death of the cat. Oh yeah, Damian knows about the cat. This ends up leading to a huge fight between the two wherein they wreck a good portion of the Batcave. Needless to say, Bat Daddy and Super Daddy are none too happy about this, and both kids are going to be heading to boot camp. So in the fallout of the previous issue, the Super Sons, yeah, I know they technically get that name at the end of the issue, but I'm going to start calling them that now anyway, are traversing a snowy mountainside. It seems that Batman and Superman, after the horrible fight the two boys had in the genetics lab, decided to strip their children of their capes, and as such, their greater connection to the superhero culture. If they want them back, they're going to have to prove they can work together and solve a series of challenges that their two fathers have thought up for them. Of course, John and Damian just can't seem to see eye to eye on anything. Damian is overly serious and overly critical, while Jonathan is still learning the ropes at being a hero. We soon discover that Batman and Superman actually reached out to some of Damian's compatriots for the challenges. The first one would be Nobody, aka Maya, who says that if they can take a map off her, then they'll get their way to the next challenge. Maya actually does pretty good bamboozling Superboy for a second, but Damian knows Nobody and her tricks, and because of it is quickly able to take the map. He doesn't share it with Superboy, he just runs off on his own. Superboy gets a fun little talk from Nobody, basically saying, yeah, I know he's a jerk, but hey, you gotta keep up with him, right? Their next challenge brings the Super Sons to a train yard, but to get through there, they're going to have to get through Goliath, who's in a hunger rage right now. It's here in this challenge, John's ability to fly is absolutely invaluable. I like to, Damian further complains that Super Dad is probably watching them right now from afar. Pfft, what kind of father watches over their kids, right? The train ride ends up being a super short one, as once again Superboy, Robin, and Goliath need to pull all their abilities together to make it out just in the nick of time. In fact, Alfred started feeling a little scared for the kids at a second there, like he didn't think they'd be able to make it out in time. While they still aren't friends or anything, Jonathan and Damian do finally discover something that they can both agree on, and that is the fact that they will never agree on anything. Their final challenge challenge ends up being having to traverse a hurricane. Of course, both boys have two radically different ideas on how to best traverse the storm, and they just barely escape this one by the skin of their teeth. Superman says technically they passed the test, but they didn't work together and as such didn't learn a lesson, so they're going to have to talk about this more when they get back to the cave. As we soon discover though, the boys do manage to get another chance to prove themselves. You remember they spilled all those genetic samples in the previous issue? Yeah, well, turns out those samples belong to a bunch of famous Batman villains, and they congeal together into a giant genetic monster, which the boys are managing to defeat, if only by pooling their skills together. Jonathan freezes it and Damian hits it. The two dads are actually shocked that they were saved by their kids like this, but Alfred, oh, he's not shocked at all. He always had faith in them. In fact, he is the one who gives them back their capes and the moniker of Super Sons. And hey, if you like that name so much, then be sure to pick up the actual Super Sons comic once that starts coming out. As the comic winds down, the Wayne and Kent family retire to Hamilton County for the Christmas season. The dads decide to go and pick out a Christmas tree, and the boys, it's their job to cut it down, but wouldn't you know it, they start fighting each other once again. Superboy hitting a particular nerve with Robin by saying that he's short. And as we join the comic, we can clearly see Superman doing a little farming. Yeah, I know, right? Actually farming. This isn't some half-baked cover. He's actually taking this seriously as a job. Unfortunately, Clark doesn't seem to have the same green thumb Pa Kent had. Everything is dying, not just on his farm, but all over Hamilton County. He figures this is a real issue, and so he tries to get to the bottom of it. While chasing the trail of this otherworldly drought, Superman ends up coming face to face with Dr. Alec Holland, aka Swamp Thing. Superman recognizes this guy right out of the gate, but Swamp Thing knows full well that this Superman isn't the same Superman that he once knew. What's really funny about this meeting is that Swamp Thing basically needs to explain the Green, a new 52 concept, to an older 52 Superman. Basically, for the uninitiated, the Green is a matrix of life that strings together everything that is plant life. Furthermore to that, Swampy says that this new Superman is to blame for why everything in Hamilton County is dying, and the reason is actually really clever and really well done. As any comic nerd worth their salt can tell you, Superman, indeed all Kryptonians, draw their amazing superpowers from Earth's yellow sun. Only it would seem, unlike the younger, less experienced, less powerful Superman, this older Superman actually is sucking down more sun juice and therefore adding more sun radiation around himself. That's why nature is sick and dying in Hamilton County, and because Swamp Thing is a protector of the Green and a warrior of the Parliament of Trees, he pretty much has to stomp Superman here and now. Well, okay, it's a little bit more complicated than that. Swamp Thing offers to fuse with Superman and more or less get him in line with what the new 52 Superman was doing. But as you might have guessed, Clark isn't exactly all gung-ho about fusing with an Earth elemental, especially one like this who he doesn't exactly know. This means the two men end up having a knockdown, drag-out brawl, and while Superman may be incredibly powerful, Swamp Thing is on a whole other level. He is literally like fighting the very Earth itself. Holland eventually ends up forcing a fusion between himself and Superman, and in doing so, he's allowed to see into his mind. He realizes how this new Superman has adopted this Earth and how this new Earth has adopted him in return, but for things to get back to the way they used to be, this Superman is going to need to cut ties with his old memories. Essentially, to put nature back in whack, Superman is going to need to be reborn via Swamp Thing so that he can once again truly be the man of tomorrow. And yeah, that's pretty much exactly what happens. Swamp Thing helps out Superman, life returns to Hamilton County, and Swampy even gives the Superman family a nice little keepsake. Okay then, so as we join the comic, we check on in with Lois Lane, who is checking out what's going down over at the Hamilton Horn, the local small town newspaper. Yeah, just because she took a job at the big Daily Planet doesn't mean she still isn't interested in what's going on in her own community, which I think is kinda cool. In fact, Lois even gets tipped off to a potentially important story. It turns out some real estate individual is actually buying up a bunch of the county, but before this story can get elaborated on, this nice editor woman ends up getting attacked by Frankenstein, Agent of Shade. Ah yes, Frankenstein, one of those beloved cult DC characters who can never quite seem to get a solo series off the ground, but who continues to make a lot of really fun cameo appearances like this one. Frank has a major nasty narc on for this editor woman, but luckily Lois managed to save one of the Hellbat gauntlets from her adventure on the moon, and as such is able to blast the undead dude. Of course, it's going to take a lot more than that to drop Frankenstein's monster, so Lois, as if she hadn't done enough cool shit that day, manages to steal Frank's ride, a flying motorcycle. It's at this point Superman ends up
up getting involved. Hey man, Frank, it looks like you're attacking my wife, man, in broad daylight in my own backyard. I can't let this stand, brah, not even a little bit. Frankenstein still holds up and down that this is part of his mission and that woman has to die. I also find it interesting that this older Superman doesn't recognize Frankenstein, even though they have crossed paths before in the old universe. Then again, if I remember the last annual I read correctly, I think as part of his adventure with Swamp Thing, Superman had to give up a bunch of his memories from his old life. Also, I'm pretty sure the Frankenstein that this Superman knows was actually a villain anyway, so it might make sense why he's not giving him a fair shake here and now. The two take turns battering and knocking each other around for a little bit, actually being more evenly matched than you might think. That's when Lois and the editor woman show up yet again. Frankenstein manages to grab the lady and tear off her latex mask. Yeah, all Scooby-Doo style. Wouldn't you know it, Frankenstein was totally right all along and she is a horrible monster. Go figure. So picking up from where the last issue left off, Frankenstein had torn up Hamilton County and endangered the life of Superman's wife, Lois Lane, while trying to apprehend an evil alien despot who was hiding out on Earth. Superman is upset about this turn of events and all the lives that could potentially have been hurt, but it's actually Lois who gets more offended than anybody, considering that this evil alien decided to take the form of a friend of hers. Superman doesn't really agree with Frankenstein's more brutal methods, and Frankenstein, well, he's just a guy with a very dirty job he has to do, and he doesn't want to have to spend any more time here than he has to. Unfortunately, as he's about to leave, though, the capsule that was sent to take Krug away is actually intercepted by a bounty hunter who turns out to actually be the bride of Frankenstein. Which, I mean, hey, you know, she might be a far cry from the Hammer horror movie Bride of Frankenstein, but I think she's still pretty hot as far as undead four-armed women go. The bride isn't exactly on good terms with Frankenstein or Shade, and because of that, a fight ends up breaking out, a fight that Krug manages to use as a chance to escape, but she does so in possibly one of the weirdest fashions. Essentially, Krug lets himself get blown up into 1,000 little pieces so each individual piece can actually give our heroes the slip, because that's just something his race could do. This means our three superpowered individuals are going to have to put their differences aside if they want to catch this dangerous criminal. It's also here that the real meat of the story begins to form. You see, we slowly but surely find out the sad story of what broke up Frankenstein and the bride. Apparently their son had turned into a horrible monster, and Mommy Not-So-Dearest killed the kid to save him from himself. Clark and Lois end up seeing the harsh bitterness that's formed between these two former lovers, and we get a nice little parallel drawn between what relationship problems they have, kind of raising a superpowered son, but seeing that as bad as they got it, it could always be a million times worse. In the end, Superman manages to stop Krug's ship before he can escape Earth, and even manages to tie him up in a nice can for Frankenstein to haul away. Before the two famous monsters leave Hamilton County, Frankenstein goes out of his way to try and patch things up with his wife. Apparently he kept both their wedding rings all these years. The bride, yeah, she's not having any of it, and it actually ends on a really bittersweet note. But if nothing else, this run-in with these two paranormal lovers has given Clark and Lois some perspective on their own relationship. It might not always be pretty, but they have each other, they have their kid, and at the end of the day, that's really all that matters. Okay then, so as we dig on to the story, we see Farmer Clark Kent driving home in his pickup truck when a very strange individual jumps in front of his car. It's actually Superman, a Superman from another dimension. This is the Superman of the Red Sun universe, thus the Soviet getup. It seems that the man of Soviet steel is here right now because he's being chased by a group of terrible interdimensional creatures who are collecting him for some sort of list. Red Sun Superman is weakened, but luckily our Superman is at full strength and isn't about to let something like this go down. As such, the two men join forces and manage to beat them back with some heat vision. Man, you gotta love that about Big Blue. I don't know who you are, I don't know where you're from, but you're clearly a Superman, and as such, I'm going to help you. This is really the sort of story you could only tell with this older Superman. This ain't his first rodeo, he's been around once or twice, he knows about alternate Earths. Now, Red Sun Superman has also come to this Earth with a warning. He says that he's not the only one on these monsters' hit list. Also, Kenan Khan, the new Chinese Superman, is on the list too. Surprisingly, the only person who's not on the list is actually our Superman, who we're dealing with, which, asks a whole lot of really interesting questions. So, all in all, it's been a pretty weird day for Superman, am I right? But guess what? Things have only just begun, because it's at that point a portal opens up and the Justice League Incarnate comes out. Don't remember who the Justice League Incarnate are? Well, they're that team of superheroes put together by Grant Morrison to oversee multi-dimensional threats. In fact, their book was called Multiversity, and this story right here that we're reading is called Multiplicity. Morrison always
always said he had hoped other writers would pick up where he left off with these characters, and now here we have it. Justice League Incarnate's leader, Calvin Ellis, who is not only a Superman in his own right, but also president of his world, two guesses on who he's based on, says that their team has lost one of their own, Captain Carrot, and that they better hurry to protect Keenan before it's all too late. Sadly, Superman and his dimension-hopping new friends are all too late, as Keenan ends up getting grabbed by the same monsters that Superman and Red Sun Superman had fought with. It turns out they can basically spit black holes at you. Geez, and to think we were this close to having Superman and Chinese Superman meet up for the first time. Clark is resilient as ever, saying that, well, now it's obvious what they're going to have to do. They're going to have to brave time, space, and other dimensions to get this kid back and stop this evil threat before it can hurt any more Superman. Or super women, or super animals, or really anything with super in its name. Okay then, so this issue wastes no time letting us know how serious this mystery threat is to Superman throughout the multiverse. We see the Justice League of Assassins, a type of heavy metal looking super beings from a Mad Max alternate universe, get absolutely destroyed battling the force that seems to be kidnapping Superman. Word of this reaches the ears of the Justice League Incarnate, who have recently managed to recruit the DC Rebirth Superman. This book actually does a really good job bringing back and reusing a lot of the stuff that Grant Morrison wrote for his Multiversity project, mainly how the JLI are able to travel to the 52 distinct Earths that exist out there in the multiverse. Basically, they use chords like in music to tune into the frequency of other universes. Another cool thing that Tomasi offers up in this issue is showing that Superman actually has a super brain too. His idea is to travel around the multiverse and recruit all the other Supermen who haven't been captured yet, figuring that it's only a matter of time before they get grabbed. This means we get a great opportunity to see and briefly interact with Superman from other universes. There's the Super Demon, there's the Superman Beyond from the very awesome Batman Beyond universe, even the Wild West Superman shows up for a minute. Now you would figure all these Superman joining together to battle one mystery foe. The bad guy doesn't stand a chance, right? Only as we soon discover, our Superman has other ideas. He wanted to use all these Supermen as bait, essentially, to draw this evil alien warlord into a fight. Yeah, that's just how selfless the Man of Steel is. He wants to take the entire burden onto himself and doesn't want to see any other Superman from any other Earths get hurt. So as we join the comic, the Man of Steel is in the clutches of prophecy, and you know what, it actually took me this long into the story to figure out that's what this dude's name was. Now at first glance, this dude looks like any other evil emperor or villain you got going on in comics, but his main goals are actually a little bit interesting. You see, he's been stealing supermen and women from across the multiverse to siphon off their powers. Why, you might be asking? Well, it's because he fears a multiversal threat that is coming very soon, and he wants to be powerful enough to stop it. We admittedly don't get a lot of backstory on Prophecy, but when we take into account his plan and the fact that he dresses much like the supermen and women do, you gotta figure maybe he was a protector of his universe once upon a time before going rogue. Now once the supermen and women have had their powers drained from them, they're not killed. Instead, they're used as cheap labor to mine some sort of important metal that Prophecy wants for his operation. It's here Superman actually comes face to face with Kenan Kong, the new Chinese Superman from the main universe. They have a pretty cool little exchange wherein Superman basically says, "Geez kid, I wish I could have met you under better circumstances than these." Clark does, however, manage to give a rousing speech to all the other beaten down supermen and women to not give up. Why? Because help is most definitely on the way in the form of Justice League Incarnate. You see, Superman left a trail for the JLI to follow. Once again, making use of that whole Grant Morrison idea that the easiest way to travel throughout the multiverse is through a series of musical chords. The heroes figure they can track Superman if they can build themselves a device that will allow them to follow these chords to where Prophecy is hidden out in the multiverse. The only problem is that's going to take a lot of time they don't have. It's here that Red Racer, a multiverse version of the Flash, steps up and offers to make the ultimate sacrifice. He'll use his Speed Force powers to compress time so they can finish the device in minutes, even though he knows full well doing so will end up costing him his life, and it does. But hey, we get this really great panel that pays homage to the classic Crisis on Infinite Earths cover. Now, if I had one minor complaint about Superman issue number 16, is that in the end everything gets wrapped up into a neat little bow very quickly and without very little issue. Justice League Incarnate and the rest of the superhero cavalry show up just in the nick of time. Superman and everyone else ends up getting their powers back. Interestingly enough, they get it through a great big blue light, which, depending on where you stand, could perhaps be a reference to Dr. Manhattan interfering in events, or if you're like my buddy Matt, who's been pitching a great theory about the Superman we've been dealing with right now actually being Electric Blue Superman. Either way though, the day is saved and Clark manages to head on off to China to get some food with Keenan and talk shop about being a superhero. Okay then, so as we join the comic, young Jonathan Kent is home alone as both of his parents are off working, one being a journalist and one being, well, you know, Superman. It's a busy schedule. Kathy Cobb, the local neighbor girl and one of Jonathan's only friends, ends up coming to him needing help. Apparently her grandfather and their prize cow wandered off their farm earlier that night, and now she's starting to get worried. The two kids saddle up their bikes, all Goonies Stranger Things style, to go looking for the two. Only, wouldn't you just know it, the trail goes all the way through Dead Man's Swamp, which, you know, I would say is something of a foreboding name, but then I'm reminded in this universe we have Crime Alley and the Suicide Slums. The swamp is a very scary place, and not just because this is also the same area that Superboy glassed with his heat vision not so long ago, but because there's also a tall, dark, and scary individual that seems to be stalking the kids. Uh-oh, Superboy and friend, looks like you caught Slender Man on a laundry day. He doesn't have his suit and he's extra angry because of it. This tall, dark, and gruesome individual also brings with him a rather paranormal fog that causes the kids to hallucinate. Everything starts getting bigger all around them, animals and even a weird abandoned house. Wow, you know, it's moments like this that I'm reminded that these kids really are kids. If they were just a little bit older, they probably would have seen more horror movies in their life, and no, you never go inside the creepy house. On the upshot though, the kids do end up finding the cow. However, much like everything else in this swamp right now, it seems to be having a terrible night with a curse. Why, Bessie even goes out of her way to try and drown the two kids with a torrent of milk. I mean, you know, there's certainly worse ways to die, I guess. And then the strangest thing happens. The kids are saved at the last minute by Grandpa Cobb, who comes out of nowhere and pulls them out of the well where they were currently being drowned. Interesting that he shows up and then everything starts to go back to normal, am I right? Cobb also seems to know a hell of a lot about the swamp and told his granddaughter to never go there. And you know what, if I may also mention events that happened in previous issues, you'll recall that Cobb came face to face with Frankenstein, Agent of Shade, and he was not freaked out at all, when most people in that situation probably would be. I wonder about you, Grandpa Cobb, I really do. As the comic winds down though, Jonathan is happy that he was able to help out and is able to sneak back into bed before his two parents get home from work, them being none the wiser of the adventures that he had that night. Taking a closer look at Superman issue number 18, everything that's been going on with the Man of Steel, everything that's been going on in the DC universe following Rebirth all comes to a head here and now. What'll happen next? Let's hop on in together and find out. So as we dig on into the comic, we check out the base of operations for one Mr. Oz, that mysterious all-powerful individual who has been kidnapping people from all throughout the different comics. So far, this creepy cloak dude has absolutely been on top of his game and no one's been able to challenge him. However, that all seems to have changed just recently as someone actually escaped his clutches. A person whom we soon discover has a great love and affinity for Superman. Now from there we transition on over to Kent Farm. It's Lois and Clark's anniversary and they're having a big party right now, which includes the exchanging of gifts. It's been hard for this trio trying to accumulate themselves to a new Earth and a new status quo, but overall they think they managed to have done the job just right. Their pleasant evening is shattered, however, by the appearance of the mysterious doppelganger Clark, who has been hanging out on the periphery of this book for some time now. This guy is an enigma wrapped in a mystery, wrapped in a blue suit and a pair of glasses. Stranger still though, Krypto the super dog actually seems to recognize him. And that's not even the creepiest thing this guy does this issue. He drops off a photo album that's filled with images of Lois and Clark and the lives they lived on their previous Earth. Right on down to red trunks on Superman, in fact. But just as soon as this guy showed up, he disappeared. It's after that that the Kent family house ends up catching on fire. But this is no regular fire, it's a strange blue fire that doesn't so much burn stuff away as it makes it absolutely disappear. Poor John the Superboy ends up getting caught in the fire, and slowly but surely he too ends up phasing out of existence. As you might have guessed, Superman and Lois are absolutely mortified at the disappearance of their son, but Clark swears up and down that he will go to the ends of the earth, track down the doppelganger Clark, and get their kid back. So then, as we join the comic, Superman and Lois Lane have gone full on Liam Neeson in Taken to try and get their son back. Or Hugh Jackman in Prisoners if you prefer. Or Casey Affleck in Gone Baby Gone. Or Mark Wahlberg in The Lovely Bones. Wow, when you stop and think about it, there's a lot of movies about kidnapped children I could draw upon to make a reference. They hit up the doppelganger Clark's residence only to find out that it's really eerie. For one, it's incredibly clean, like no one human lives there, and all the food is nothing but candy, as if a 6-year-old did the shopping. Just for the record, my condo looks exactly the same, but not because I'm sinister or anything, just because I'm a dude who works on the internet. Eventually, our heroes do come face to face with doppelganger Clark, and the surprising thing about this, though, is that he's actually the one who feels insulted. Now, all throughout the lead up to this storyline, we got the feeling that this doppelganger Clark was not who he seemed to be, that he had memories that couldn't possibly have been his own. It's in this issue, little by little, the facade begins to strip away and reveal the true being that exists underneath. What's surprising, though, is that Doppel Clark uses his amazing power to take the form of a bunch of different Superman villains. You got your Lex Luthor, you got your Bizarro, you got your Brainiacs. Heck, even Mongol shows up, and all throughout it, this guy keeps yelling at Superman to say my name, say my name. Man, you know, you gotta feel bad for all of Doppelganger Clark's neighbors right now. They hear a huge scuffle and some man just yelling say my name over and over again. Either a crime is taking place, or they figure Clark Kent decided to ditch the whole news media thing and finally take up making amateur porn. In the end, though, the Doppelganger Clark is revealed to be, and this is truly a stroke of genius right here, it can't be understated, the real force behind all of these events turns out to be none other than Mr.Mxyzptlk, or Mxyzptlk, or just Mxy for short. A little imp from the 5th dimension with near godlike powers who has been bedeviling Superman since the Golden Age. Now, it used to be for a while there, Superman and Mxy had themselves a rhythm. Mxy would show up, would play a bunch of tricks and pranks, sometimes dangerous, sometimes not, and Superman would have to defeat him by getting to say his name Keltipsy backwards. Only something really bad happened to Mxy, which is why we haven't seen him for so long, and why Mxy is blaming Superman now for his suffering, so much to the point that he has stolen his son and vows to play the greatest game ever, by making people actively forget that his son existed at all. Now, that's the end of the first part of the story, but Action Comics number 975 is actually a double-length issue, and the second story is penned by the totally awesome Paul Dini, a man who was a huge fan of writing Mxy over on Superman the Animated Series. Basically, this story involves Mxy telling Jonathan Kent, his captive, what happened to him and why he's been missing for all this time. It seems that during one of his outings to the main Earth to try and mess with Superman, he was captured by the mysterious green-cloaked Mr. Oz. It would seem that Oz has some very long-term plans for the Man of Steel, and he wasn't going to allow a little 5th-dimensional imp to introduce so much chaos into Superman's life and possibly jeopardize his plan. And it's right around here the story takes one hell of an unexpected turn. You see, Mxy isn't scared of Oz. He knows that Superman will come and save him. I mean, he considers him a friend. They've been having their little back and forth since the Golden Age. But when years fly by with absolutely nothing, Mxy begins to lose hope. He begins to hate and resent Superman. It wasn't fun and games for the imp anymore. He actually truly began to plot his revenge against Superman. But first things first, he had to escape, and to do that, he ended up spamming Keltipsy. After all, if the power of the word was enough to banish him to his own dimension again, surely if he said it enough times, it could banish him from his prison, which it did. But Mr. Oz would not let up, so Mxy had to get clever. He used one of his most powerful spells to rewrite his mind to make himself believe that he truly was Clark Kent. This proving why he was able to pass all of Batman's lie detector tests, because even he didn't know who he was, and he only figured it out once he saw Superman again with his family. A family that, and this is the truly sad part here, Mxy always believed himself to be part of, because again, he's a 5th-dimensional being. He remembers all iterations of Superman from the Golden Age to the cartoon to right now, and Mxy was always there. I mean, after all, Superman saves everyone. Superman can do anything. He even saves the evil people, and yet Mxy feels left out and hurt because Superman didn't try and save him. This is why he's taken his son, and this is why he'll do everything in his power to hurt Superman now. Picking up from where the last issue left off, Lois Lane has forgot about her son due to Mxy's magic, and Superman is trying desperately hard to get the imp to break the spell. Only, unlike other times these two titans have clashed, there is no game here, no rules, only revenge. Mxy opts to take Superman and Lois to the in-between of the in-between, a place outside the normal universe. A place that even Superman finally begins to note has an eerie blue vibe about it, both the blue fire that took Jonathan away as well as a bunch of blue electricity. I wonder. When was the last time Superman and blue electricity meshed? It's in this place Mxy has developed a terrifying and brutal gauntlet for Superman to run through, a twisted, candy-inspired daily planet building. Mxy says that Superboy is at the top, only if the father wants to save the son, he's going to have to fly up and get him. Here's the rub, however. The further Superman goes up the tower, the more of his memory he begins to lose. By God, it's like surfing on the internet. The longer I'm on it, the quicker I forget out why I'm even here in the first place. From there we transition on over to the limbo where John is being held, only here's the thing, John is not entirely alone. He meets two red orbs of energy that are very familiar feeling to him. Red electric energy, you don't say. You know, that reminds me of another time Superman and red electric energy mesh. These orbs, as we soon discover, are actually representative of the spirits of the new 52 incarnations of Superman and Lois Lane. Clark, along with Lois, who he absolutely refuses to leave behind, especially as her memories are being ravaged by Mxyzptlk's magic, fights his way to the top of the twisted Daily Planet. Only even he, despite his amazing power, starts to lose his memory. Mxyzptlk uses this chance to gloat and also give the reader a lot of important insight into what went down. He mentions how Superman was split at the beginning of the New 52. He does not say why, but he does make a point of saying he was split, and neither Superman saved him, and so because of that, everything is fair game right now. Mxyzptlk's ultimate revenge is locking Superman away like he himself was locked away, only in the end we discover that Mom and Dad Super didn't have to save their son at all. He's able to save himself with a little help from that red energy. Red energy that just so happens to find new homes inside Superman and Lois Lane, in a way fusing these old 52 and new 52 versions together into one. Yep, that's right everyone, Superman just leveled up. It's Shin Superman, 100% final form Superman. Superman ascended, whatever you want to call him, he's more powerful than ever, and he's got a fancy pair of red new boots. Mxyzptlk, and I'm sure by extension the readers too, are absolutely blown away by this, and that's pretty much where Superman number 19 comes to a close. So, picking up from where the last issue left off, the red electric spirits of New 52, Lois Lane, and Superman had jumped into the bodies of the Superman and Lois that we've been dealing with all this time. At first it all seems great. They seemingly beat Mxyzptlk at his own game, a fact of which the fifth dimensional imp is not taking well at all. The only problem, and admittedly this is a pretty giant problem right here, right now, this Lois and Clark do not remember ever having a son. Heck, they don't even remember being in a relationship. They think this kid is crazy at best and under Mxyzptlk's control at the very worst. Stranger still, Mxyzptlk opts to use this opportunity to try and get the young Superboy to join him, to come away to another dimension, away from all of this. Away from the man who hurt him, and assumedly away from the force that split his father in the first place. Who is he talking about? Is he talking about Mr. Oz? Is he talking about Dr. Manhattan, I wonder? Superboy, being a hero in his own right and being mature beyond his years, of course refuses Mxyzptlk's demands. Moreover than that, he summons up the power of the electric blue spirits representing his own mother and father to blast Mxyzptlk into submission, or at the very least blast him into boredom, because it's at this point Mxyzptlk decides to abandon this dimension before it collapses in on itself. Knowing him, this is far from over, and the fifth dimensional imp will be back to make trouble for the Superman family very soon, but the real issue falls to Jonathan now, trying to make this Clark and Lois remember. It's an uphill battle to be sure, but even New 52 Clark and Lois can feel the love radiating off this kid, know it's real, and know there must be something more out there. It's because of that they open themselves up like Jonathan's parents did and welcome the blue electric spirits into themselves, in doing so completing the fusion. Now this in and of itself is a pretty huge moment, the comic basically putting down its foot and saying yes, this is the one true Superman and Lois. The legacy has been restored and then some, but wait, there's more. This colossal fusion actually has ripple effects throughout the universe. You see, as Mr. Oz puts it, yes, Mr. Oz is actually a part of this comic, he narrates the tail end of it. In fact, Superman and Lois fusing with their New 52 selves means that essentially the rest of the Superman universe fused with its old counterpart. So Perry is now back to being the Perry you always knew, Jimmy is back to being the same Jimmy you always knew, same goes for all the villains. I'm not really 100% sure how that is supposed to work, but it really opens the door for some really interesting stories down the line, I'm sure. So there you have it, the day is saved, the villain is vanquished, and the Superman family fly home with John leading the way, Super Dad giving him a pat on the back for really being the hero in this situation. And oh why yes, because Jonathan thought it was so cool, Superman's gonna keep those red boots from here on out. It really ties his costume together. So there you have it everybody, the conclusion of Superman Reborn and Action Comics number 976. All in all, I thought it was pretty damn great at summing up all the different reasons why I love Superman and why especially I love this new era in Superman. After a lot of questions about where this new super family and the New 52 Lois and Clark fit, we now officially have a definitive answer, and that is, well, they fuse together. And while the comic doesn't straight up tell you how or why they were split, the writers do manage to drop a number of references to possible culprits out there. Maybe Dr. Manhattan, maybe something tied into the deeper DC universe, who knows? I think by far though the biggest triumph of this issue has to be Jonathan the Superboy. He's grown by leaps and bounds and has really become an integral part of this new DC Rebirth universe in a very short amount of time. I mean, he started this arc getting kidnapped, he was the inciting incident, and by the end he was doing all the cool hero stuff. He saved his parents, and I personally think that's super awesome. If you're a new or old Superman fan, or heck, even if you just want to follow the bigger mystery in DC Universe Rebirth, I think you must definitely read this book. Well, as we join the comic, we get to see Superman rocking his brand new costume, which is very reminiscent of his old costume, complete with brand new bright red shiny boots, flying all over the world and basically delivering goodwill. Yeah, it would seem that things are going pretty good for the big blue Boy Scout now that his own personal history has been fused with the history of the New 52 version of himself. Granted, he wasn't the only one. His wife Lois got the same treatment, and as we can clearly see on the Kent family farm in Hamilton County, they are officially the Kents now. No more hiding, no more assumed names. It's what they are. This is admittedly a pretty small change, but it does make my job making these videos a lot easier now that I can just call them the Kents and don't have to refer to them by their assumed names, the Whites. Not that I was doing that much. It would seem that a major storm is ready to hit Hamilton County, and as such, Clark and his family are batting down the hatches. And you know, I say bat, and that's quite ironic because they get some very unexpected guests in the form of Batman and his son Damian. In a truly laugh-out-loud hilarious scene, Lois comes out to the barn to where all these superheroes are conducting their business, only to tell them to come inside out of the rain and the cold and act like normal people. Now, why is the Dark Knight out of his element in sunny, happy, small-town Hamilton County? Well, as we discover, it actually involves Jonathan Kent. Batman's been running some tests on the kid on behest of Superdad, and he's come to a realization. You see, Jonathan is a human Kryptonian fusion, the likes of which no one has ever seen before, and no one is exactly certain how powerful he could very well become. Batman assumes that he'll become more powerful than his father once he's able to master his abilities. In fact, the reason he's not blowing off the roof right now with his amazing abilities is what makes Bruce worrying that something in the environment in Hamilton County is holding him back. Now, being the world's greatest detective that he is, Bruce jumps to the conclusion that maybe there's some sort of additive in the food, namely the milk from that funny dairy farmer who lives down the way, the grandfather of Jonathan's new friend. This actually makes a lot of sense. That dairy farmer keeps coming back in a lot of different stories when he honestly has no reason to. Batman decides to investigate Bessie, the prize cow of the dairy farm, only to be taken hostage by some mysterious black alien goo as the comic ends. Right then, so picking up from where the previous issue left off, we join the comic on a truly heartwarming scene of Superboy and Robin Damian Wayne having themselves a little slumber party. Batman had gone off to investigate the nearby dairy, believing a chemical compound in the milk was keeping the young Superboy from reaching his full potential. Batman never came back from this outing, and as such, everyone's starting to get worried. Moreover than that, Clark is starting to become quite suspicious of the friendly milkman himself. If you'll recall, a couple issues back, this guy had a run-in with Frankenstein and didn't flinch. He's also seeming to be pretty close to John at all times. I think the moral of this story should be clear to everyone out there reading right now, and that is, hey, don't accept free milk. There's no such thing as free milk. There's always a catch. Superman and the Super Sons decide to go topside and scour Hamilton County looking for any traces of Batman, and oh wow, I guess I can officially call them the Super Sons now that they have a book. They don't refer to themselves as that, but it's their name. The trio doesn't get very far, however, as Hamilton County comes under attack by a giant octopus monster. In fact, it's one very similar to the one Superman and Superboy fought very early on in this run. Wouldn't you know it too, it just so happens to be fair time again in Hamilton, which means everyone who's anybody is in the epicenter of this small town, which means, you know, the chance of someone getting killed is very high. Superman and the boys do absolutely everything in their power to try and contain the giant monster while also rescuing people down on the ground. In the end, it all proves to be incredibly difficult, and even Superman himself starts to get overwhelmed and even knocked around a little bit. Getting incredibly frustrated himself, as well as a little angry that his dad can't get the job done, Jonathan ends up going all Gohan from Dragon Ball Z on us and tapping into his powers. He cooks the monster with his heat vision, essentially saving the day, but then a very interesting thing starts to happen. Everyone starts ragging on Superman for not being able to stop the destruction and stop people from getting hurt. But they all end up applauding Superboy for, as they put it, doing what needed to be done. Needless to say, John feels pretty bad about what what happened. He lost control, and as his super dad puts it, what you do with your powers will not only just change people's lives, it will change the world as you know it. Up until now, everything's been fun and games with being a Superboy, but now you see the dark side of people and the dark side of having superpowers. You can never do enough. After this little father-son fight, Clark decides to send the boys home as he's going to check out Dead Man's Swamp himself to see what happened to Batman. Damian Wayne, being the classic bad influence that he always is, say that they should go on their own to look for the Batmobile. Tensions are pretty high between both boys right now, one dad angry and one missing. It's not long before the two end up wrestling each other. And that's when something very strange and very unexpected happens. You know that little girl, John's best friend at home, the granddaughter of the milkman? Well, she shows up to help John, assuming that Damian is trying to hurt him. And she does this with the use of psychic powers. Yes, apparently she's been watching over John this whole time, and she says nothing will hurt him ever as the comic ends. So as the comic opens, Lois begins to realize that neither her son, her husband, or her son's friends have actually made it back from the investigation. Furthermore, after all the chaos with the giant squid attack in downtown, she's beginning to worry that they might be hurt or worse. She decides to head into town to launch her own investigation, and I mean really, she's a Pulitzer Prize winning journalist. You figure they would have gone to her first for help. This isn't her first case she's cracked. However, it's not long before Lois ends up getting more than she bargained for when she sees a bunch of the townspeople acting very strangely. She ends up tailing this friend to a secret bomb shelter hidden beneath one of the municipal buildings. And it's here we get genuinely one of the best twists I've read in a comic for a very long time. If you don't want it spoiled, hop ahead, but for those of you who don't care, get ready for it because it's pretty big. You see, as we discover in this issue, ever since the Kent family moved to Hamilton County, they've actually been spied on this whole time. In fact, when Lois rushes home to try and warn the Justice League about all of this, we find out the conspiracy goes so much deeper than just the milkman. The entire town, from the mayor to the teacher to basically everyone we've met so far, they were all in on it. Oh my god, they frickin' hot fuzzed the Superman family, or Murdered on the Orient Express them if you prefer an older reference. Not only is there a huge conspiracy against the Superman family, but these people might not even be human, as we discover. They try and take Lois hostage, but she's no fool. She is, after all, the wife of a superhero and the daughter of a hard-as-nails general. She can defend herself, and she can defend herself really well because, as we discover this issue, she never got rid of the gauntlet from the Hellbat armor she picked up during the fight with the Eradicator. And she puts it to great use fighting off the rabid townspeople, and that glove comes in extra handy because it also just so happens to summon the Batmobile, which allows Lois to drive it. Geez, Lois, if you keep doing a great job like this, don't be surprised if Batman tries to recruit you. I bet he has a Batgirl costume in your size. Now, as the comic winds down, we once again check in with Superman, who finds that creepy Silent Hill house in Dead Man's Swamp, only as we discover the house has an even darker surprise than anyone could have suspected. People all being kept alive in tubes. Not only just the people we lost, but also people who we've seen and then didn't see again, like Frankenstein and a couple of the aliens from the beginning of Lois and Clark. So, picking up from where the last issue left off, Lois Lane is still at the mercy of Cobb, the evil milkman who is seemingly involved in this conspiracy against her and her family. Lois is a real deal tough broad and doesn't go down without a fight, using the last of the energy in the Hellbat gauntlet to blast Cobb, and yet he still does not go down. Whatever he is, he's certainly not human. Now, Superman had found where a bunch of people had been being held underground in a bunch of alien-esque tubes, but when he hears Lois is in danger, he comes rushing back to duke it out with the Milkman. Also, Milkman is not his official name or anything, but if I have to give Cobb a supervillain name, I totally want to call him the Milkman. The truly creepy thing about Cobb, indeed everyone in the town we've seen so far, is they don't really seem all that bad. They keep saying how they love Jonathan, how they want to protect him, and how this is the only way they can do it. Eventually, Superman gets pretty fed up and just ties Cobb up with some girders because unfortunately he's needed in the city. You'll remember how Hamilton County seemingly has a real giant monster problem as of recently. Yeah, apparently they're just pouring in from somewhere. Superman's not alone in fighting them, however. When he returns to the center of town, he sees that there's a bunch of costumed, superpowered individuals, almost alien-looking people duking it out with the monsters. These, as we find out, are actually the true forms of all the townspeople. We see Lois's boss from the paper, the doctor, the teacher, all of them with amazing powers battling the monster threat. And what do they call themselves? Well, the Super Elite, of course. Now, the Elite is already the name of a group of super Superman villains who thought themselves heroes who fought crime with zero tolerance and weren't above killing people. This revelation actually makes a lot of sense when we consider a couple issues back the townsfolk were totally cheering on young Jonathan for killing that giant octopus while his dad chastised him about it. The chaos in the town square only gets worse and worse. A piece of shrapnel ends up hitting Lois in the leg and seemingly severing it completely. Yikes, that is a nasty, nasty injury to befall just a regular, everyday, normal person in comic book world. Lois isn't worried about herself, however. She just wants Superman to cauterize the wound with his heat vision so he can get back to work finding their son from whoever has taken him. And speaking of the son, this is where things get really creepy. You see, the mastermind behind the Super Elite has hooked up young Jonathan to an H.R. Geiger chair and is forcing him all Clockwork Orange style to watch everything that's happening in the city. All the while being a devil on Jonathan's shoulder, running down his father and his tactics, saying how he's not fit to be Superman, not fit to save the world when he can't make the hard life or death decisions. It should come as no surprise then when it's ultimately revealed that this mystery villain pulling all the strings in Hamilton County turns out to be Manchester Black, psychic Brit and all-round thorn in Superman's side. That being said, he's undergone a bit of a redesign here. He looks a couple years older, his Union Jack is now a belt buckle, not his whole shirt, and he seems to have lost his purple hair and piercings. Oh well, I guess we all gotta grow up sometime. Alright, so as we join the comic, we're treated to a little flashback that gets us up to speed on essentially what Manchester Black has been doing since he last battled Superman. It would seem he was touring around space in a super advanced craft that I'm pretty sure isn't a TARDIS, but it might as well be a TARDIS. He came upon two incredibly powerful warring races and managed to get inside the ear of one of the young children belonging to one of the races and get them to make the hard call to exterminate the other. In a way, this was kind of a dry trial run for what he would end up doing with John on Earth, proving that he could be the Faustian devil on someone's shoulder, making them do evil things. Now back over with Superman, he was forced to leave all the craziness in Hamilton County to go take his wife Lois to the hospital after she pretty much lost a leg. No word on whether or not they got that reattached, but hey, if they don't, imagine all the money you'll save on shoes now. It's 50% off all the time. And as you might have guessed, Lois doesn't really care about herself, she just cares about her son's John's well-being. When Superman returns to Hamilton County, he lifts up his own house to find a series of tubes and cables connecting his own home and all the other places in town to Dead Man's Swamp. It's after that Jonathan just simply walks up on his father, but it's clear he's been shaken and rattled by everything Manchester Black has shown and told him. Superman is none too happy to hear about all this and tries to fry Black. But being an incredibly powerful telekinetic, Black is able to stop the eye lasers like he was frickin' Kylo Ren and even light his smoke off it because he's just that slick. Superman and Black have themselves a little dust up, all the while talking about their own individual ideology. Manchester Black saying Superman doesn't go far enough, that the world has moved past him, that his type of heroics don't fly anymore, and that if the world is truly going to be saved, then Black needs to mold young Jonathan into a Superman for the current day and age. A Superman unafraid to take lives when it matters. Help ends up coming for Superman and Superboy in probably one of the most unlikely of forms, and that is Farmer Cobb and his granddaughter Kathy. They've been feeling a lot of discontent with the Elite right about now, and as such decide to turn on Manchester Black, allowing all the people that Black had taken hostage to free themselves from the goop. With the good guys getting some very much needed reinforcements, Superman is all but ready to take the fight directly to Black and get his son back. Unfortunately, Manchester worked this one out as well, and as such has his own crazy team, the Elite, as well as a newly mind-controlled Jonathan, aka Superboy Black, to challenge his father. Wait, he's actually called Superboy Black? Wow, me feels someone has been watching a lot of Dragon Ball Super right about now. Okay then, so as we join the book, a mind-controlled Superboy Black as well as the rest of the Elite aliens are duking it out with Superman and the other good guys that were saved from Black's prison. It's a difficult fight made all the more complicated by the fact that Superman doesn't actually want to hurt his son, and as such he's taking way more hits than he's actually dishing out. It's clear that John is still in there somewhere as he reacts a little bit to when his father speaks, but it's going to take a lot to shake him from this horrible black goo-inspired mind control. Batman says that he and the others will do everything they can to hold Manchester Black and the Elite off while Superman deals with his son. This plan is not without its own set of setbacks. Taking the brunt of the damage is Frankenstein, who, being held together with a bunch of stitches, gets them unraveled by Manchester Black's telekinetic powers in what might be one of my favorite images from a comic that is already loaded loaded with excellent images. The Superman-Superboy fight, on the other hand, ends up getting taken to the air, and overall, Superman's a little heartbroken. He had always imagined the first time him and his son would be able to fly side by side with one another, and now that it's finally here, he's trying to murder him. Black's manipulation also means Jonathan is tapping into all sorts of powers he really shouldn't be able to at his age, and because of it, he's giving his father one hell of a run for his money. Seeing as they're on much more of a level playing field, though, Superman doesn't feel too bad about throwing a couple hands his son's way. Geez, here's just really hoping that Superhero Child Protective Services isn't watching him right now. Despite Superman's best efforts to break on through to his son, in the end it's actually Lois who manages to cut through Manchester Black's mind control, and she does so while standing on two legs. Yeah, despite it seeming like she got a leg cut off in a previous issue, turns out that was just more of Black's manipulation. The angry British supervillain decides if he can't have a Superman of his very own, he'll simply just kill them both and be done with it. In a surprise twist, however, it's Kathy who ends up jumping on in to help Superboy out, creating some kind of psychic backfeed. One that proves to be so powerful, not only does it break Manchester Black's mind control over Superboy, but it seemingly shatters Black's own brain, forcing his consciousness elsewhere. This also not before the energy from Manchester Black's own ship that was creating all those monster wormholes managed to wash over young Jonathan, showing him a potential future wherein he is an older Superman, seemingly married to an older Kathy who has embraced her alien power, and oh yeah, Damian is there as Batman too, because hey, why not? And with that, the day is saved, but now comes the hard part, and that is actually cleaning up Hamilton County and seeing what will be done with the elite aliens. They say they never wanted to hurt Superman, they too were under Manchester Black's control. In an interesting little subversion of expectations, the aliens actually want to stay on Earth. They quite like Hamilton County. Moreover than that, they like the people that they had become. If Superman will allow it, they wish to stay on Earth and build a home for themselves, much like he himself did as a young boy, and really this is a great teaching moment for Jonathan too about forgiveness. And yeah, they do just that. Hamilton County is rebuilt bigger and better than before. The Kents enjoy one of their last nights there as well before they all have to end up moving to Metropolis. But in his heart of hearts, much like Clark's home will always be Smallville, Jonathan's home will always be Hamilton County, and before he goes, him and Kathy share a sweet moment together, and oh look at that, he's even learning to fly now. So as we join the comic, we're actually treated to a flashback of Clark as a young man. Pa Kent was putting him through his paces, saying that if he really wants to be the man around the house, then eventually he's gonna have to learn how to work the farm. But just to put a little spice on this one, Clark is allowed to run the farm for one complete day, but he can't use any of his superpowers. He's got to do it the old-fashioned way. The themes of fathers trying to relate to their sons is continued in the present storyline, where Superman and Superboy join forces to battle a bunch of alien robot drones. John is growing up fast. He's getting more and better use out of his powers, why he's even started flying after the end of the previous Manchester Black arc. This is a good thing, but at the same time too, it's a bit of a problem for Superman. His son is striving for independence, doing his own thing, which means he's also not listening to Superman when he should, and he's causing a lot of needless collateral damage. Clark opens up about these feelings to Lois, saying he doesn't want his son to slip through his fingers, especially given the whole post-mind control thing Manchester Black did to him. Lois, intelligent lady that she is, surmises that what Clark and John are going through right now is probably not so different from what Pa Kent and Superman went through when he was a boy, and as such says that maybe Clark should do the same thing with his son that his father did with him all those years ago. Let him take the reins, let him make his own mistakes and see what happens. Jonathan is totally gung-ho about getting to be Superman for a day, but little by little his own inexperience and own recklessness begins to shine through, like how he saves a mother and child from a burning building but doesn't check to make sure he couldn't bring the whole building down. Superman also won't stop being a complete and total helicopter dad during this whole thing, never too far from his son to try and criticize everything he's doing. Things take quite a nasty turn when the father and son duo end up coming face to face with two supervillains, Dreadnought and Siphon. Once again, Superboy thinks he has this one in the bag and charges the two baddies, not knowing that one of their special abilities is able to interfere with their superpowers for just a moment. And hey, if a short brush with death doesn't make you take your head out of your ass, nothing will. It's at that point Superman and Superboy decide that they are stronger together working as a team, and Superman also concedes that he needs to let his son live a little, make his own mistakes, and eventually become the man that he's meant to be, not just a carbon copy of himself. A lesson that, hey, wouldn't you know it, Pa Kent actually came to himself as the flashback story ends. And yeah, there you have it. Father and son end up winning the day, have themselves a touching little heart-to-heart, and everybody goes home happy as the comic comes to a close.
Alrighty then, so as the comic opens up, we join Superman at the tail end of a 3-day world-saving binge. Admittedly not the worst binge I've ever heard of. This comic would seem to try and answer the eternal question that fans like myself have had about Superman forever, and that is, does he actually need to sleep? The answer is yes, yes he does. Oh look, Superman is so tired he could only get the top part of his costume off and not the bottoms. It's adorable. Lois decides that after defeating Manchester Black, going to a dinosaur island, and saving the world multiple times, that the Kent family are in desperate need of a vacation, and so she's rented an RV. This won't just be any fun National Lampoon-style family vacation. Oh no, this is their big 4th of July vacation. FYI, I'm pretty sure due to scheduling conflicts, this book was actually supposed to come out the day after July 4th, but hey. All you need to know is that we're in store for one hell of a patriotism-tinged Superman adventure. First stop on their trip is the gravesite of Deborah Sampson, a little-known Revolutionary War hero, who disguised herself as a man and fought for American independence, why she even was honorably discharged and won a court case to get her military pension when it was all said and done. Being the daughter of a general, Lois Lane feels a great amount of kinship with this young woman. While on the road to their next stop, the Kents come across one of those coexist bumper stickers, and they learn a little lesson about religious and spiritual freedoms in America. And I mean, really, is there anything more American than learning an important, much-needed lesson about harmony from a bumper sticker? They're lucky it wasn't a Gear Done decal or a pair of truck nuts. Next up, young John gets to choose the spot, and he wants to go visit the 107th Infantry statue honoring World War I heroes in New York City. John says he likes this particular statue just because of how raw it is in its depictions of the horrors of war. The statue is unfortunately covered in graffiti, but Superman being Superman is able to fix it in the blink of an eye. Oh, but the road trip's not done yet. They head over to Philadelphia to see where the Declaration of Independence was made, and Superman talks about his love for the Founding Fathers. He also uses his amazing X-ray vision to tell the guy working there that he should check for water damage. Oh, how helpful Superman is. Oh, but wait, we're not done yet. We still have one last scene of patriotism so heartwarming it would cause Uncle Sam's beard to grow 3 inches. You see, the Kent family find a kindly disabled veteran begging for change outside of a restaurant, and what do? They invite him to come in and eat with them. The restaurant hostess takes offense to this, saying that they have the right to refuse service to anyone and that he might make some of the other patrons uncomfortable. I don't know why. It's not like he was suffering from mental problems or anything. He just seemed like a normal dude in a wheelchair. The vet tells the Superman family about his experiences over in Iraq in 2003 and the accident that cost him his leg. Ooh, okay, about this. Whenever you bring up real wars around Superman and in the DC universe as a whole, I'm forced to eventually ask this question, that is, why didn't Superman or the Justice League stop the war? Furthermore, if Desert Storm 2 ended up being a thing, I guess that means 9/11 happened. Why didn't Superman stop it? They were just in New York a couple pages ago. All that aside, as the comic begins to wind down, we leave on another heartwarming family scene as young John falls asleep, tuckered out from his big adventures of the day. Superman and Lois decide to take some time for themselves, have a glass of wine, and get a little romantic, before Superman is unfortunately called away on important Justice League business, but he swears to meet the family at the next destination in a couple days. Alright, so picking up from where the last issue left off, Superman had run ahead on some important Justice League business, but he returned just in time to rejoin his family vacation, and one of the fringe benefits of being Superman is you never have to wait to get your trip started when a dude can literally fly you wherever you need to go. It's for all these reasons and more I'm sure Superman and the Superman family must save a bundle on toll booths, am I right? The family's journey takes them all the way to DC. They see a bunch of protesters outside and Superman gets to talk to his son about the importance of discourse, one of the many things that makes America great. They then take a stroll along the war memorials, again Superman going out of his way to educate his son about America's involvement in pretty much every war, taking extra time and effort to explain the Korean War, a war that he believes has become the forgotten war. Superman goes on like this for a very long time too. There are walls and walls of text filled with textbook information. For a second there I felt like I stopped reading a Superman comic and got thrown into an episode of the Magic School Bus. Although in all honesty, Frizzle was probably some form of metahuman anyway, so maybe it all makes sense. Lois also takes this opportunity to pay respect to her departed uncle who lost his life during Vietnam. It's a nice little scene, and much like the previous issue, it reminds you that the Lane family is a proud military family, and this is the sort of thing they would do. Hey, speaking of the Lane family, does General Lane know John exists? Does he know he has a half-alien grandson? If so, what does he think about this? Next up, the family takes a trip to Gettysburg, where once again, we're hit with a bunch of information about the Civil War, the horrors of neighbor fighting neighbor, brother fighting brother. John and Clark even say the area around the place is eerie as if it was filled with ghosts. The artist then goes out of their way to render a bunch of ghosts around them, which would be well and good in a context wherein we knew ghosts didn't exist, but this is the DC universe. We know ghosts exist. In fact, so did demons and angels and everything else, but I guess if you brought that up here and now, that would kind of deflate the patriotic moment, wouldn't it? It's in the Kent's journey they come across another big family having a picnic in the woods near Gettysburg. They're celebrating a birthday, not of anyone living, they're celebrating a birthday of their great-great-grandfather who died during the Great Battle. He was a Union soldier who joined the army far too young, who fought for what he believed in, ended up getting gravely wounded before the camp he was recovering in got swept away by the water, so his body was never recovered. A tragic story for sure, one that I'm sure resonates with a lot of American families, but I as a nerd can't stop but feel, wait a minute, you had a whole flashback to the Civil War and you didn't put in a little cameo appearance by Jonah Hex? Oh wait, yeah, that's right, this story was supposed to come out closer to 4th of July, wasn't it? So uber serious patriotism all around for everybody. The family's tragic story clearly struck a chord with Clark because that night he tosses and turns wishing he could do something for them, and hey, because he's Superman, he absolutely can. He decides to drag the river, finds the body of the unknown soldier, and then manages to deliver it back to the family in the night. Again, another beautiful, warm and fuzzy moment from Superman here, but as a nerd I cannot help but ask the question that, does this family not know that he's Superman now? I mean, they'd have to be pretty dumb not to. They told the story to a guy in the woods, and then later that night the body showed up again. Oh, as we join the comic, we see a young boy walking the city streets playing the DC Universe equivalent of Pokemon Go. Oh, I get it, it's Zoo Crew Go. Oh, that's funny, so instead of Pikachu you get like Captain Carrot and stuff. Man, you know, the Zoo Crew Go game really went downhill after the New 52 Zoo. This kid, as we discover, becomes the first of many in Metropolis to go missing. Parents are getting all sorts of freaked out, turning the city inside out looking for their missing children, and they're putting a ton of pressure on Superman and the police in the process. Speaking of Superman, this case is actually hitting him harder than ever before, mainly because, well, he is a father now, and because of it, he has a whole new laundry list of things to fear that once he never did. I mean, sure, Superboy John is a demigod, and I don't think he has to worry about stranger danger anytime soon, but hey, you know, it's an interesting place to take Superman emotionally. It's actually Jimmy Olsen who makes a quite appreciated return this issue that sets Superman down a path he didn't think of before, and that is that all of the pictures Jimmy has been taking have this strange yellow tint on them. Following up on this, Superman finds a series of yellow footprints carrying a strange energy signature to them. Superman realizes that this is the same energy carried around by the supervillain Sinestro and the sinister Yellow Lantern Corps. Figuring they must be involved, Superman decides to give chase. When Superman actually manages to catch up with Z, the little boy from the beginning of the issue, he's kidnapped another child, having been completely taken over by the evil space entity known as Parallax. Superman gets his bell rung, not expecting to get hit by such a blast from such a little kid, a mistake he won't be making again in the future. To try and track the Parallax kid back to his hideout, Superman strains his abilities to try and see the emotional spectrum, an ability that he has but is a lot difficult for him to access. Superman also really wishes any of his Green Lantern friends could be here to help him right now, but unfortunately Hal, Jess, and Baz are all off planet. When Superman does catch up with Parallax at the old abandoned schoolhouse, he sees all the kidnapped children have been assembled in some sort of sick insect web. Parallax has been feeding on their fear and the fear of the parents to help regain his strength, and so far it's been working out pretty great for him, but he wants oh so much more. He wants Superman's body as his next host. At first, Big Blue is able to keep the nasty bug at bay, but once Parallax threatens to kill all the children, well, Clark's hands are kind of tied right now, aren't they? Parallax ends up possessing Superman's body, and as such, Superman is given a snazzy new Yellow Lantern costume. Ain't it pretty? Now, all that power in one shell is going to be tough to take down. It seems like the only person who could possibly save the Earth and Superman at this point is, well, it's frickin' Thal Sinestro, everybody. Old Pinky over here says that Superman has something that belongs to him and he's going to stop at nothing to get it back as the comic winds down. Alrighty then, so as we open up the comic, we join the climactic battle between between the controlled Superman and Sinestro already in progress. Old Thal ain't exactly doing so good here. Parallax was powerful on his own, and now he's joined with the demigod that is Superman. He basically gets his pinked mustachioed butt knocked around like a rag doll. But what Sinestro lacks in physical strength, he more than makes up for in a devious tactical mind. You see, he purposely let himself get wailed on so he could transport he and Superman to Quard, home of the Weaponers. A place that not only is able to cut Superman off from Earth's yellow sun, but more importantly, there's an army of Weaponers waiting to do Sinestro's bidding and knock Superman out. Of course, just because Sinestro interceded in this dilemma doesn't mean he's the good guy here, quite the opposite. He wants to steal Parallax's power for himself. That's going to be much easier said than done, however, as the space bug has taken a deep hold inside Superman, and Sinestro's going to have to get quite creative if he wants to get it out again. What we're essentially treated to is the Lantern Corps equivalent of an exorcism, and by exorcism, I mean Sinestro just whips the shit out of Superman a bunch, attempting to make him feel his worst, deepest, darkest fears. We get such classic hits as fear of not being able to save everybody, fear of Doomsday returning, and some new ones like Lois dying before him of cancer. But perhaps Superman's most interesting fear is his newest, and that is revolving around his son, Jonathan Kent the Superboy. Superman fears letting his son down, and because of that, he would turn to the dark side. Also, hey, for all you Easter egg junkies out there, look at the bodies that Dream John had killed. We got Miss Martian, we got Blue Beetle. It's a whole Young Justice Season 2 reunion here in this pile of dream corpses. It's Sinestro's buddy, Lysa Dark, who brings up the idea that maybe trying to fight Parallax with more fear might just be a really dumb idea, like trying to put out a fire with gasoline. Thal does not like this answer, and this only goes to feed his destructive paranoia. He distrusts Lysa, he distrusts all the Weaponers, because Parallax could very easily be living in any one of them, and indeed he is. Even while still trussed up, Superman manages to save the life of one of the Weaponers before eventually escaping himself, taking control of Sinestro's very own ring. Superman essentially powers through, and using his own deep-seated sense of hope manages to coax Parallax back inside the ring, claiming that he'll take him far away from Sinestro or anyone who would want to manipulate him. Admittedly, I'm no expert on Green Lantern lore, so I'm not exactly sure if this would work in universe, but it's just so damn cool I'm willing to let it slide. Anyway, Sinestro is not liking any of this, and in fact, he decides to make a tactical retreat with Dark. The Weaponers, in a surprise twist, end up celebrating Superman like a hero, him apparently doing more to help them out in just a few minutes than Sinestro has done in their entire history with each other. And as the comic winds down, the story comes full circle with Superman returning home to look over his son John as he sleeps, knowing that everything is well. Alrighty then, so as we join the comic, there's a disturbance happening at Star Labs, so, you know, must be a day that ends in Y, am I right? Apparently one of their head scientists is having something of a breakdown right now. His wife took the kids, and now that he's heard the higher-up suits at the company want to weaponize his life's work, well, that's more than enough to push him over the edge. Luckily, Superman is there to talk him down. All of that, though, despite taking multiple pages, actually has nothing to do with the story, because the real story starts when we check on in with Lois Lane and Jimmy Olsen, who are in South America right now trying to get an interview with one of their most brutal drug lords. Only much to Lois's dismay, this drug lord and his army has already been murdered at the hands of Deathstroke the Terminator, one of the DC Universe's greatest killers for hire, or at least he used to be. If you've actually been reading the new Deathstroke book, which you should because it's awesome, you'll know that Slade Wilson has actually turned over a new leaf and is currently a good guy. This story takes place before all of that. Lois needs to find a replacement story, and she figures, hey, people love psychotic killers, so why not write the ultimate piece about Deathstroke? Superman disagrees, having fought him once before in the pages of the Deathstroke book, and as such knows full well just how dangerous a guy he can be. But being the news hound that she is, once Lois sets her sights on something, it's very hard to dissuade her, even if that means going into the deep, dark bowels of the criminal underworld to try and set up a meeting between her and Slade. As we discover, though, Deathstroke has a lot of enemies, and as such, Lois isn't the only one trying to smoke him out of his hole. There's this dude named Cestus and his group of assassin killers called the Throng. Superman manages to find out that Lois is in need, and as such swoops on in and takes care of the bad guys for her. They have themselves a wife-husband argument about whether or not he was looking over her shoulder this whole time, but Superman says he was sure that Lois had it and only came when he absolutely needed to. It's only when Superman leaves that Lois actually comes face to face with Deathstroke, who apparently was using her to try and draw out Cestus and his guys, which even though Superman already defeated the bulk of them, there's actually more dudes for Deathstroke to fight, all the while Lois narrates how totally super sick awesome he is. Deathstroke's also totally cool with being interviewed too. Apparently on top of being a super crazy killer for hire, he's also a massive narcissist who loves to see his name in print, or at least according to this book he does. Also, despite being a Pulitzer Prize winning journalist, Lois sure does pull a lot of punches in the interview with Deathstroke, instead choosing to talk up how great he is. She doesn't ask obvious questions like, hey, what's up with the eye, and hey, what's up with the family? Despite this very soft article writing, the Deathstroke story ends up being a giant hit, and Perry White gives Lois a nice little pat on the back. Unfortunately for her though, as she leaves the office later that same day, Deathstroke is outside waiting for her. Apparently, Lois was actually the target all along as the comic ends. Alrighty then, so picking up from where the last issue left off, Lois Lane had written a very popular article on Deathstroke the Terminator, only to find out she had become his newest target. Man, you know, she really must have misspelled his name a bunch. Maybe even misquoted his age. I mean, why else would someone want to kill a journalist, am I right? Superman is quick to get involved and even manages to stop a speeding bullet from hitting his wife. Deathstroke notes that unlike the last time they fought in Deathstroke's own book, Superman is a lot more angry and primal than he's ever been. Another thing you might not know if you don't read the Deathstroke book, which you should because it's great, one of Slade's newest weapons in his arsenal is the Icon suit, a special set of armor that manages to redirect kinetic energy. Essentially, he can take a hit from Superman and direct it right back at him. The only problem is Deathstroke isn't exactly sure how many hits he can take at one time. Superman has got to be careful too. As much as he would love to just vaporize Deathstroke for hurting his wife, to kill another would make him exactly as worth as Deathstroke, and as such he has to walk the line between putting him down but not killing him. Deathstroke scurries away, but Superman is still worried about the safety of his wife and even their son now that they have one. He wants Lois to go into hiding for a little bit until Deathstroke can be dealt with, but Lois, being the strong, independent journalist that she is, refuses to leave town and run scared. This means Superman pretty much sticks to her like glue and gives her the same sort of signaling device he gives Jimmy Olsen in case any trouble should happen. It's only a matter of 3 days though before Deathstroke decides to make his move. He sets fire to a large propane depot down at the docks, knowing full well that the Daily Planet will be chomping at the bit to cover the possible catastrophe. While Superman attends to the fire, Deathstroke manages to get the jump on Lois. It's right around here we discover that Lois was never actually the target, and this was always about Deathstroke and Superman. Slade ends up presenting Superman with a Sophie's choice. He can either stop the spread of the flames and save the pier from going up in smoke, or he can try and save his wife. Everybody knows Superman is fast, but is he as fast as Deathstroke's finger on the trigger? Of course, Superman could deal with this whole situation right away if only he was willing to kill Deathstroke. But this is the big blue Boy Scout we're dealing with, the man of tomorrow who is always a symbol of righteousness and morality, and as such he chooses to deal with the fire. But does this mean Deathstroke actually does it? Does he kill Lois? No, of course not actually. There's another layer on top of this. You see, Lois was never actually in any danger. Deathstroke wasn't meant to kill anybody. He was hired by Amanda Waller of Task Force X to test Superman's limits, how he could be prodded and pushed, and what it would actually take to make him want to kill someone. In fact, as we discover, the only person who was in any danger at all was Deathstroke himself. His Icon suit had been fried during the original street fight with Superman, and he could have been killed at any moment. But hey, that's also the kind of man Deathstroke is. No matter the danger, if he takes your money, he's going to see it all the way through to the end. Alrighty then, so as you may or may not recall, at the end of Darkseid War, Darkseid, the Lord of Apocalypse, well, he kind of died and left a huge power vacuum on Apocalypse. The planet's slave population more or less elected Lex Luthor to be their leader, believing him to be part of some sort of ancient prophecy. He lied, of course, and then everyone just kind of forgot about it. Not the least of which being Lex himself, who got a fancy new mother box out of the deal, as well as a brand new battle suit. Tech that he would eventually use to try and make a go of becoming a superhero in Metropolis, and after many roadblocks, it's actually starting to pay off. In fact, Superman is even accepting him now. We get a very cool scene wherein the two men actually join forces to stop a group of bank robbers in Justice League masks. Of course, they still bust each other's balls like it's going out of style, but for once, Superman and Lex Luthor are actually seeming to be going in the very same direction. That's what makes it all the more unfortunate when those slaves that elected Lex to be the new leader of Apocalypse show up at his building to more or less kidnap him for being an absentee king. And I mean, hey, in their defense, they are kind of right. Lex tries to send a distress message over to Superman, but he catches him at a poor time. The Kent family is about to head out for a dinner and movie night. Superman brushes off the whole thing. Apparently, Lex Luthor makes a habit of calling Superman at home with that frequency tech
tech like in the Superman movie to just show off what cool stuff he's building in his workshop. A fact that I find on one hand to be really funny, but on the other hand find to be a little sad that Lex Luthor has no real friends and has to bug Superman, a guy who up until a while ago was his worst enemy. The Kents have a great time at the movies. They saw The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly, by the way, a western beloved by Pa Kent and shared with a young Clark, so now he's sharing it with his son. Lex might be gone, but he left a series of fail-safes in place in case he ever did end up getting kidnapped. Those fail-safes involve a bunch of giant robots programmed to hunt down anyone with Kryptonian DNA. This includes Superman, of course, but it also includes young John the Superboy, of whom Lex Luthor didn't even know existed. Now, the robots aren't programmed to hurt Superman, but they are programmed to take him where he needs to go. You see, they turn into a giant mother box, which are themselves powered by a littler, tinier mother box. The Kent family ends up getting transported all the way across space to the planet of Apokolips, but because this is comics, no one can get transported to the same place. The three of them all got sent to different places. Lois by far, though, got the shortest end of the stick, getting teleported right behind Granny Goodness and the female Furies. Uh-oh. So as we join the comic, we check on in with Lex Luthor, aka the whole reason these events are transpiring right now. If you recall, at the end of Darkseid War, Lex became the leader of Apokolips, but he also got super busy trying to fill Superman's big red boots on Earth. He more or less left the people who thought his coming was some sort of crazy religious prophecy high and dry and holding the bag. For once in his life, Lex doesn't love all the attention he's getting, but when these people start demanding too much of him, he opts to pull the ultimate passing of the buck by saying that he was lying to them from day one about being their promised champion, but don't kill him just yet because he also brought them Superman, who much better fits their vague prophecy. Then again, maybe he's not the one because Superman and Lex didn't come to this planet alone. So did Jonathan Kent the Superboy and Lois Lane his mother, and hey, while we're talking about Lois, she by far got the shortest end of the stick on a planet that is legendarily known for its short sticks. You see, she got herself captured by Granny Goodness and the female Furies, who despite his absence still remained fiercely loyal to Darkseid, the same way Kevin Spacey is fiercely loyal to dodging questions. Ho-ho, topical. Lois's luck begins to change, however, when the Furies get attacked by a giant sandworm. Oh man, methinks George Lucas is going to sue somebody. Chaos being a ladder and all of that, Lois manages to use the situation to her advantage, slipping her chains and grabbing a gun, helping to blast the worm to death. Now, as comic readers, we always knew Lois was a bona fide badass, but now Granny Goodness agrees and says that, hey, they really only ever had one Fury from Earth before, and she would love it if Lois joined her ranks. You know, this actually makes a ton of sense. Granny Goodness has met Superman a ton of times before, but's never actually met Lois, and as such isn't aware of their pre-existing relationship. Lois is cautious, but ultimately has no choice. If she's gonna save her son and husband, having some heavily armed friends can't hurt, and thus Lois the female Fury is born. I like it a lot. So as we join the comic, Superman and Lex are trying to outrun a bunch of the fanatical apocalyptian citizens who believed Superman to be the coming of their prophecy. Honestly, the only thing this scene is missing is some crazy banjo music for running away. Superman is mad at Lex for lying to these people, and he's extra mad that his family has now gotten pulled into all of this. For a second, much like the reader, I'm sure Superman thinks that this could possibly mean Luthor is backsliding into a life of villainy, but when Lex actually gets to speak up and talk about his motivation, Superman's taken aback. You see, Luthor didn't lie to the people of Apokolips that their great prophecy was coming true because he was trying to scam them or hurt them or anything. Quite the opposite. He wanted them to have hope. He wanted the Superman-S to mean something on one of the worst places in the universe. They then promptly get knocked out of the sky and taken hostage by Kalibek, the Prince of Apokolips, son of Darkseid, and one of the leaders of the multiple factions all vying for control of the planet. From there, we transition on over to Superboy, who's been running for his life this whole time. A growing boy needs his food, and right over the next ridge he smells meat cooking, only it's not the sort of meat you would want to eat. It seems that the apocalyptian hunters, in their desperation, have decided to cook their own war dogs. War dogs with sauerkraut and mustard. Superboy is nothing if not a big old softy at heart and opts to try and save the rest of the dogs from getting eaten, even though these very same dogs were trying to eat him in the previous issue. Luckily, we're playing by the rules that say all dogs have ironclad senses of honor, and because of that, they decide to help the young Superboy find his family by sniffing them out. Back over with Superman and Lex, they see what Kalibak is working on. It's a big giant gun capable of cracking the planet's core. And I mean, really, the core of Apokolips has to be so hot and molten that even if you throw a Kryptonian in there, he's gonna die, right? Hey, wait, in Darkseid War, wasn't Superman exposed to like the molten core of Apokolips, and didn't it turn him evil for a little bit? I guess Kalibak has a really short memory, and speaking of short memories, it seems like every time Darkseid goes missing, Kalibak and Granny Goodness and the female Furies all end up duking it out for control of the planet. That's totally what happens, by the way, but the Chaos ends up ultimately helping out Lois, who's gone undercover with the Furies. She tries to spring Superman and Lex, but ends up getting caught herself. But wait, what's that over the horizon? Is it a bird? Is it a plane? No, it's Superboy riding a pack of war dogs to save the day.
Okay then, so picking up from where the last issue left off, all the major factions vying for control of Apokolips and Darkseid stead have decided to meet up for one giant Royal Rumble match. You got Kalibak, the son of Darkseid, looking to make his own power play, Granny Goodness and the Furies, the Darkseid loyalists, trying to gain control of the planet. And then in the middle of it all, you have the Superman family. Superman himself fights gallantly. Superboy, John Kent, distinguishes himself very well by managing the Dogs of War to help on the side of the good guys, and even Lois gets a nice little capper to her story arc of joining the female Furies by eventually turning against the female Furies to help her husband and son, a fact of which Granny Goodness and the others are none too happy about. Also, I guess it wouldn't be a review if I didn't gripe about power levels a little bit. Should Lois be able to single-handedly defeat all the Furies? No, probably not, but is it awesome? Yeah, so I give it a pass. And hey, what about Lex Luthor, the person for whom all of this is really happening? He got himself knocked out in the previous issue, and he stays out cold for the majority of the fight. The bad guys even attempting to drop him down to the cold, icy core of the planet. Superman saves Lex from this public execution, and in doing so shows mercy, something that is in desperate short supply here on Apokolips. Superman also vows to clean up the mess Lex made and fix the power vacuum on Apokolips by, well, essentially becoming their new leader, as the peasants' prophecy had predicted. He says that Apokolips is now under his protection and the protection of his family, that they should strive to be a symbol of hope in the universe instead of the regular symbol of tyranny that Apokolips is always known for. Granny Goodness and the Loyalists will be locked up, all the slaves of Apokolips will be freed, food will be given out to the hungry. Granny Goodness and her Furies get locked up, food is passed out to the hungry, and Superman gets that nice soldier woman and blind man to get together some good people so that Apokolips can have its first ever completely legal above board election so the people can choose their own leaders and, also let Superman off the hook at the same time. Now, when everyone returns back to Earth, Superman is ready to confront Luthor and vice versa. Lex is pretty upset at Superman for leaving him in the lurch at the beginning of this story arc after he had gotten kidnapped. Likewise, Superman is mad at Lex for lying and exasperating the problems on Apokolips. He says that despite how much he's grown over the last little bit, despite how much good they may have done working together, at the end of the day, perhaps they never will change. Perhaps Superman and Lex Luthor are destined to be at odds with one another. Luthor seemingly agrees with the Man of Steel, because as the comic winds down, Lex tears off his own House of L symbol before setting it aflame right in front of Superman's eyes, perhaps signifying a return to a more sinister Lex Luthor. So this Superman story opens up in the most unlikely of places, mainly Wayne Manor. Bruce is chilling out for the night reading a book, that sort of thing, when all of a sudden he's taken aback by an intruder smashing through his study window. Ah, I get it, making a reference to the famous bat that flew through the window. I can dig it. This guy, if you've been reading the current run of Detective Comics, you'll know is an evil Tim Drake from the alternate Titans of Tomorrow future. In that story, he had tried to kill Batwoman and quote-unquote save the Bat family from its ultimate downfall, but he was defeated by the current timeline Tim Drake. After his defeat too, he was seemingly sucked up by hyper time and disappeared, only now he's back again and twice as angry. He and Bruce have themselves a knockdown, drag-out brawl all throughout the manor, smashing up just about everything that
that comes in their path, which, makes me feel bad for poor Alfred, who you just know is gonna have to clean up this mess. Eventually, Evil Tim is able to get the upper hand on Batman by making use of a gun, the one thing that he's willing to do that he knows his alternate timeline mentor won't. But the plan, as we discover, isn't to kill Batman or even hurt him. No, that's incidental. What Evil Tim wanted was actually kept deep in the bowels of the Batcave, and that is Batman's own paranoid contingency policies. Aw man, we're getting all Tower of Babel up in here. Evil Tim wants to get his hands on something that'll allow him to kill a Kryptonian. And hey, speaking of Kryptonians, and from there we transition on over to Superman. In a nice bit of continuity, he's trying to repair the ice statues of his parents that were destroyed in his battle with Mr. Oz. The fortress security alarms go off, and before you know it, the Man of Steel is duking it out with this darker, twisted Dark Knight from an alternate timeline. Tim hilariously thought far enough in advance to try and modulate his voice so Superman didn't know who he was up against, but Superman quickly deals with that. I mean, even if he didn't, the using a gun is a pretty dead giveaway that this isn't the real Batman. What's even more interesting is that Superman apparently read Batman's file on Evil Tim and as such basically knows what his deal is, which is why he's further confused why he would be attacking him right now of all people. When before his hate boner seemed to be pointed solely at Batman and the Bat family, well, here's the thing. You see, Evil Tim didn't get back to this dimension on his own. He says before he was working to rectify his own timeline, but now he's working for someone else to try and fix something much bigger. But before he can carry out his real plan, though, he's going to have to make sure Superman and Batman can't get involved. Superman is further shocked to discover that Tim can pilot his Kryptonian war mech. It seems that Superman in Tim's timeline actually taught him a little Kryptonian before his untimely death. Rightly so, the big blue Boy Scout is getting pretty ticked off. He's not used to getting bounced around like this, especially not on his own home turf. It's this rage that Evil Tim was hoping for, because Superman recklessly barrels forward and ends up stepping directly into a red sun trap. Again, this Tim might be evil, but he's also complicated and doesn't want to hurt anybody, let alone Superman, who saves so many lives. He says, though, that he's going to keep him under glass for the time being while he deals with his real target, Superman's son, John Kent, who he aims to kill in order to save his future. Okay then, so picking up from where Super Sons left off, Titan Tower got itself all exploded by an enraged Superboy. Geez, here's hoping the teen's insurance policy covers active Kryptonian, am I right? It's a wonder that no one is dead considering how close they all were to the explosion. Where is John? Well, Damian managed to spirit him away into a nearby submarine. Robin also uses his big brain to riddle out that Superboy must have tapped into that new solar flare ability that was giving his dad Superman all that trouble, but because of his dual human heritage, it's even more unstable and even more destructive. This is why Damian is trying to get his friend as far away from civilization and the evil Tim Drake as possible before he can accidentally set him off again, and with both Superman and Batman unreachable right now, it looks like the boys are totally on their own. Now, what exactly happened to evil Tim Drake? Well, he was caught in the solar flare too, and because of that, his costume is ruined, and he continues to phase in and out of existence like a trigger-happy Marty McFly. It's for all these reasons and more, Tim opts to build himself a brand new costume in a hangar with a box of Titan scraps. He also gives himself a brand new moniker, Savior, which works just fine for me because I was getting sick of calling him Evil Tim or Batman of Tomorrow. And hey, speaking of tomorrow, and I absolutely was, it would seem that Savior's Titans counterparts in the future are actively trying to get him back, believing him to have truly gone off the deep end with his past obsession. Seriously, this dude's interest in modern times is as sick and inexplicable as the fame of Logan Paul. Ah, that's nice and topical, and now that the video has been thoroughly dated, we can move on. Savior ends up confronting the other Teen Titans, and it doesn't go the way you might think. Raven and Beast Boy don't think he's totally evil and that they might be able to get him back on the good side. This is no doubt born out of their own unresolved issues with main timeline Tim Drake and the fact that they just saw Superboy total an entire building when pushed by a stranger, and Rao only knows what would happen if it was personal with him, but all the same, they end up up coming off pretty naive here. Starfire, who's still acting as de facto leader of the team, says that no matter how good Savior's intentions might be, if murder's on the table, she's gonna fight him tooth and nail. Corey, as it turns out, might not even be Savior's biggest problem. You see, his teammates attempt to draw him back into the future, but they only end up transporting his arm, and they do so off his body. It's really brutal, actually. I mean, it's disgusting and not good to look at, like a Vice News Network list of the best comic books of 2017. Now here's the crazy thing, as the comic winds down, Starfire, Kid Flash, and Aqualad realize that Raven had tricked their mind into believing that they were repairing the tower, when in fact, her, Beast Boy, and Savior just kinda left them behind. Wow, what a super dick move, super goth girl, as the comic ends. Alright, so picking up from where Teen Titans left off, after being betrayed by two of their teammates, Aqualad, Starfire, and Kid Flash are on the hunt for Robin and Superboy. Seeing as these Super Sons managed to escape by submarine, Calderon really pulls his weight this issue by following their trail underwater. Of course, when our heroes do manage to find John and Damian, who have taken refuge in their new base of operations that they got back in the pages of Super Sons, they kinda jump the gun on their team. They assume that if they followed after them the way they did, they must have aligned themselves with Savior, that is the evil Tim Drake in case you're wondering, and indeed some of the Titans did decide to join Savior, but it wasn't these guys. So essentially what we're treated to is a giant big 3-page long fight where everyone talks about how they don't want to fight, only talk. Once everything does calm down though and they're able to speak freely, it quickly becomes apparent that they can't stay in this underwater base any longer. If they were this easy to find for the good guys, the bad guys will find them quicker. Of course, they could always remedy this problem if Superboy and Robin were unconscious. Then again, Damian isn't exactly an ambient sort of guy, so John has to punch his lights out, literally. Man, you know, that's putting a lot of trust in your teammates who not 5 seconds ago you were fighting. If I was the other Titans, I'd kick him in the balls a little bit while they were out. The team decides to take refuge in Superman's Fortress of Solitude, figuring that it would be a pretty easily defensible place. It's there they stumble upon Superman, who's still stuck in his red kryptonite prison from the last issue of Superman. Superboy attempts to break his father free, but in the end all he ends up doing is exposing himself to red kryptonite radiation, which thoroughly weakens him. And then a lot of stuff all just kind of happens at once. Superman's prison starts to fall into the ice, which freaks John out and causes him to once again go into a giant destructive solar flare, one worse than previous. And then Savior and the rest of the turncoat Titans show up, too late to actually do anything, and then the Titans of tomorrow end up falling through a time rift, only for Casey Sandsmark Wonder Woman to say that they should all put their differences aside, all in the name of trying to save an innocent child who's about to go nuclear. Oh yeah, and probably kill them all too if they're in the blast. All the teams end up working together, the speedsters running around the dome of energy trying to siphon it off while Raven tries to keep it composed with her magical powers. Connor Superman and Clark Superman also get a short moment together. Once more, it's important to note that Superman doesn't actually recognize this Connor, but Connor does know John and says that he feels bad about what happened to him in his time and how he hopes to save him this time. Eventually, Raven says she can no longer sense Superboy's spirit inside the energy dome, and because of that, Damian freaks the hell out and says that he's gonna kill Savior for what he did. Only John isn't dead, it's just that the big explosion is now sentient outside of him, and Savior says that the day can still be won if they all agree to give him the explosion energy, which they do, even though he's a bad guy who's been trying to kill them since this whole thing started. Also, the energy doesn't kill Savior, it just ends up throwing him through a hyper time where we see a greatest hits of DC moments, and that's where the issue ends, on that very weird, very chaotic note. Okay then, so a lot happened in the last installment of this story. Tim Drake, aka Savior, our sort of villain but in the end not, absorbed all the power of Superboy's solar flare, and then just kinda disappeared to do his own thing in hyper time. I smell an upcoming miniseries or maybe even a spin-off book if this one sells. This is good because it means our heroes are victorious, but it's bad because it means our antagonist is gone and the story is pretty much aimless
Metropolis for the next 22 pages. But hey, wait, we also have the Titans of Tomorrow made up of Connor Kent and a bunch of other interesting characters. Surely their interaction with Superman and the Teen Titans will be interesting, right? Only we don't get to see them interact at all because Superman Connor Kent says that his Superman told him not to divulge too much information when traveling through time or to alternate dimensions, so they just up and leave. Oh, you hear that sound, everybody? That is the sound of a million Connor Kent fans being left with balls as blue as Dr. Manhattan. Well, okay, what about Superboy? Is he still in danger of going supernova and killing everyone? That's certainly what Superman is worried about, so much to the point he figures that he should dissolve the partnership between Damian and John. You know, just to err on the side of safety, John says that what went down with Tim Drake from the future basically changed history anyway. I don't know how he knows this, but he's saying it. So they figure they're in the clear. Furthermore, John likes the idea that Damian actually had his back when other members of the Teen Titans didn't during this whole debacle. And as such, the two super sons fight to stay a team and ultimately end up winning. Speaking of teams, Damian has a lot of unfinished business with the Teen Titans, especially the three members that Judased against everyone else and chose to join Savior. Heck, that's just one of their problems. There's a real breakdown in leadership happening too. Starfire is technically the one in charge, but Damian is still the one making all the important decisions. The group is also down a base now after Titan's Tower blew up, so Superman offers use of the Watchtower for the Titans to put all of their matters to an important vote. So surely heads are gonna roll, right? And the team is gonna have to be reshuffled. It may be, but you're gonna have to go read Titans to see how that turns out. Instead, they decide to go in a completely different direction. Damian, after being a dick about it this whole time, actually does want John to become a member of the Titans and puts it to a vote. But Kid Flash, Raven, and Aqualad don't end up voting him in. They promise it has nothing to do with John. They like John. It's just, it's not you, it's us. We have our own problems we need to deal with. We can't take this relationship too fast. Damian comforts his friend John and more or less says, screw those guys, we'll go have our own fun adventures. And that, believe it or not, is where the comic ends. So that's Super Sons number 12, everybody, and I don't know how to feel about this issue. It's an epilogue issue that actually does very little epiloguing. In fact, it more or less says, hey, want to find out what happened next? Go read these other books. Honestly, as I sit back and look at this whole storyline as a whole, it feels like they maybe had bitten off way more than they could chew. Or at the very least incorporated one too many storylines that they couldn't see through to the end. The so-called antagonist just kind of wanders off. They brush off the threat of Superboy's solar flare ability. The Titans are fractured but are staying together anyway. The only real story arc that had any conclusion is Damian actually wanting Superboy on the team. But when you stop and think about it, we've already seen their love-hate relationship play out in the main Super Sons book, so this isn't really all that special. I mean, if this was going to be the everlasting effect at the end of the story anyway, did it really need to be such a big crossover? I certainly don't think so. Overall, it's not bad. It definitely starts strong and ends weak. I just cannot help but shake the feeling that there's so much undiscovered potential here.
Alrighty then, everybody. So as we join the comic, Superman is duking it out deep in the heart of Metropolis against the group of supervillains known as the Demolition Team. Oh, no, wait, sorry, I read that wrong. I mean the Wrecking Crew. No, wait, I actually had it right the first time. The Demolition Team, a group of construction-themed bad guys who screwed up robbing a bank. As you might have guessed, these perennial D-listers have nothing on the Man of Steel. They throw absolutely everything they have at him. Hot rivets, run him over with a steamroller, and Big Blue just shrugs them off like they're nothing because, well, they're absolutely nothing. Now, just off-panel, we hear commentary from people who are really into this fight and really just seeing Superman in general, as we discover it's actually a group of kids. Sick kids, no less, living in the cancer ward of Metropolis's children's hospital, and oh boy, I usually like to riff a little bit in these videos and make some comedic remarks, which, is a little hard to do when you're dealing with actual straight-up cancer kids without seeming like a total monster, so I'm just gonna pull it back a little bit this issue. Alright, everybody? Alright. Clark overhears how excited the kids were to see him. him that day during the fight, and as such he takes it upon himself to give the kids a special day out that they will never forget. He's going to make them king for a day and give them the full Justice League treatment. Oh, he clears it with the parents and the doctors, by the way. The way I was making it sound, it was just like Superman decided to kidnap a bunch of children. First up is an awesome Green Lantern energy construct trip into space where the kids are allowed to float around. For one kid, Latif, this is extra special because he lost the use of his legs back down on Earth, so actually getting to float around outside his wheelchair is pretty awesome. He does, however, feel kind of sad for his friend Gail, who lived in the bed next to him. She died just recently, which means she never got to see any of this. Ooh, harsh. Now at the Watchtower, the entire Justice League has a bunch of fun activities planned for the kids, including a scavenger hunt all over the station. It's all fun stuff too, like Superman's cape, Cyborg's robot arm, Aquaman's trident, etc., etc., but the hardest thing on the scavenger hunt list is a picture of Batman smiling. One of the kids kind of does that lost in translation thing where he whispers into Batman's ear and we're not exactly sure what he said, so pretty much you can make him say whatever you want him to say, and in the end Batman does crack a smirk. I like to imagine he said he took an upper decker in Superman's personal toilet and he's gonna find it later. Now Clark ultimately saves the best activity for last. He takes all the kids out on the surface of the moon, lets them pick their very own moon rock, and then puts their name on it using his heat vision. Well, I assume using his heat vision. No doubt meaning that whatever happens to them back on Earth with their illness, a little piece of them will always live on the moon. And yeah, as the comic winds down, Superman and the kids take in the constellations, and that's pretty much the book, everyone. Alrighty then, so as the comic opens, oh my god, what is wrong with your face? That is freaking ghoulish. Outside Bloodborne, I can't remember the last time I've seen a face so horribly disturbing, but okay, on with the story. John Kent the Superboy is hanging out with his dad in the Fortress of Solitude. Obviously, being a little kid, he thinks it's the most awesome place in the world, but Superman has some very important business to deal with. You see, after getting to actually see the destruction of his home planet Krypton back in the last Action Comics arc, he went out of his way to create a giant 3D reenactment of the explosion, and he wants his son to watch it with him in kind of like a Memorial Day style thing. Which, yeah, you know, I can understand a parent wanting their kids to learn from the past and everything, but at the same time, wow, what a morbid pitch. Hey son, let's watch a planet blow up. In an ironic twist of fate, it's not long after that Superman and Superboy end up getting a distress call on the supercomputer that warns Superman about when planets are gonna blow up. And as such, they both decide to go to the far reaches of space and warn the alien species about their impending destruction. Superman admitting along the way that he doesn't do this very often and that this is really more of a job for the Green Lanterns. Hey, speaking of DC Rebirth, Age of Heroes, Superman, what's your stance on the Green Lantern Corps and their absence during the destruction of Krypton? The to-be-doomed planet we discover is some sort of underworld fish planet filled with a bunch of freaky fish people who somehow don't look nearly as ugly as Superman and Superboy do in some shots. Superman does the oh-so-classic take me to your leader alien invader thing, only for us to discover that this world is ruled over by a bunch of religious fanatic fish people. They wholesale throw out Superman's warning, saying that if it is the will of freaky fish god that they are to die, well then they're just gonna sit here and die, mister, and to say anything else would be heresy. Superman of course can't help but say other stuff. After all, he's sure that not everyone on the planet is on board with the whole dying cause God said so thing. Of course, this means that Superman and his son end up coming under attack by the very same fish people they were trying to save, which is no good. Luckily, they end up getting rescued at the last second by some guy named Klain. This fish guy is a fish scientist, and he apologizes for the religious fundamental fish who are keeping Superman and his son down. Superman basically says, hey, no worries, it seems to be a constant all over the universe that those who try and be the most pious are often the most brutal, go figure. In the end, both Superman and fish scientists decide that they're going to work together to try and save freaky fish world no matter what the danger. Alright, so as you'll recall in the previous issue, Superman and Superboy had gone to a planet of religiously fanatical fish people to try and save them from suffering a fate very similar to the one on Krypton. They ran into a fair amount of resistance from the locals, who are saying that if they are to die, then well, it must be the will of their god, and to do anything different would be straight up heresy in their eyes.
Luckily, the good guys came across a fish scientist by the name of Klane. In fact, as we find out in this issue, he's one of the few scientific minds left on the planet, as the rest of them were all killed long ago. Klane and Superman talk a lot about the benefits of science and enlightenment versus superstition, all that good stuff. They also draw some further comparisons about what's currently going on this planet and what happened on Krypton. You see, even with Klane's great scientific know-how, he was unable to concoct a plan to save his people. Both figuratively and literally, by the way, their souls being tainted by fanaticism. He did, however, manage to develop a spacecraft, not one big enough to save a lot of people, but enough to carry away his eggs. And why, yes, they are a big gooey clutch of fish eggs. What else would they be? Klane has picked the perfect planet where he hopes his future children can go and live, start over, without the grim reality of the past hanging over them. The only problem is he doesn't trust his own rocket-making skills and hopes that Superman and Superboy would help guide his rocket to its destination. Well, geez, that's pretty simple, right? Too bad nothing is ever simple. The religious fanatics end up finding them, breaking on in, which leads to a huge giant fight. Superman manages to defeat them, but Klane catches a bullet during all of it. He's not sad, however, because he knows his children have a shot at a better life than he ever had, plus in death he can be reunited with his beloved fishwife. And believe it or not, this is supposed to be the big moment that the story has been building towards. You see, Superman is totally shocked by these words. He's basically like, "What? You're a man of science who believes in the afterlife? But that must mean you believe in God. What? That's impossible." Really, Clark? This amazes you? You've never met a person like that before in all your travels? After everything you've seen, this is what makes your jaw hit the floor? Heck, I support the overarching message of people being deep and more complex than they might seem, and sometimes holding contrasting viewpoints, but still, even I think this ultimate message is heavy-handed. Superman tries one more time to try and get the religious fanatics to evacuate the planet before they're all killed, but once again they give him the whole "if it's God's will" thing, then we'll die. But hey, thanks for trying to save us anyway, even though we've done nothing but try and kill you up until now, you're alright. So, let that be a message to you, everyone out there. If you want to get religious fanatics to like you, just absorb a bunch of their abuse, okay? Luckily, during all the chaos, Superboy was able to escape with Klane's clutch of eggs, and not a moment too soon because the planet ends up exploding, taking everyone with it. After everything he's seen and heard recently, John Kent the Superboy actually has a pretty interesting question for his superhero father, and that is, hey, Dad, do you personally believe in God? Or Rao, or whatever? I haven't been feeling like 90% of this story, but I must admit, this is a really awesome idea for a scene. What does Superman, what does any superhero in the DC universe think, for that matter, about a higher power? When on an almost daily basis, they cross paths with superpowered individuals who have powers unto gods, traverse time, space, and often always question the creation of their own universe. What is Superman's answer? Well, son, I sure do believe in something. Okay, fair answer and everything, but still, why are you ending on this? This should have been the story right here. Alrighty then, so the comic opens up in Bizarro World. We see the man himself, Bizarro, not to be confused with the Lex Luthor clone. This guy's the real McCoy. He's talking about the birth of his son, or his death day instead of birthday. Again, this is Bizarro World we're dealing with, so everything means the opposite of what you're saying. It would seem that Boy Zorro, son of Bizarro, doesn't exactly respect his father so much, and all the work he does to destroy Bizarro World, by which of course I mean save Bizarro World. Also, unlike the Kent family on the main Earth, who have a beautiful idyllic life together where they all love each other very much, the Bizarro family is super abusive. Or maybe in a world where everything is topsy-turvy, perhaps abuse is health? Again, it's kind of hard to decipher sometimes. Bizarro World's so crazy. The important thing to know though is that while his parents are fighting, Boy Zorro runs off on his own, and in a interesting twist of luck, he ends up coming face to face with Superboy and his friend Kathy. What are they doing here? Well, it seems that they've taken a page out of the Rick and Morty playbook and are having fun interdimensional television adventures, looking in on other worlds and seeing how they live. It's interesting to note, too, that John has come all the way to Smallville to visit Kathy, who is herself an alien and also incredibly intelligent, so she was able to build the dimension-hopping stuff. And yet she's still treated like a child, and in fact still lives alone after the fallout of a past Superman story arc. John is still crushing on Kathy super hard, and in fact, in his lovebird state, he shirked a bunch of chores back home that his mother is going to be super ticked off about. Later that night at dinner, Superboy tries to stay coy. "Oh no, I wasn't visiting poisoning anyone. No, I'm not in love. I was just doing trading stuff with Damian. Of course, when your mother is a Pulitzer Prize winning journalist and your father is a literal god amongst men, it's kinda hard to lie to them. Lois and Clark think the whole thing is adorable, by the way, but John just really does not want to have this conversation with his parents right now. So much to the point he runs off to bed to avoid the conversation, which, it suits his super parents just fine. They were ready to Netflix and chill, so, the sooner he goes to bed, the better. Another idea they play with in this issue is that John in his heart of hearts really misses Smallville, that he's not suited for the city, but on nights like tonight when he's together with his family who loves him, he can't think of another place in the multiverse he would rather be. And then at that very moment, as if he willed it into being, Boy Zorro ends up crashing through Superboy's window. Like he was the frickin' Kool-Aid man, oh yeah! Or I guess whatever the opposite of oh yeah would be on Bizarro World.
Alrighty then, so as this comic moves forward, it actually ends up moving back to the previous issue when John left his friend Katie's side back in Hamilton County. You'll recall Superman knew exactly where his kid was, and that's because he had someone tailing him. That person is revealed to actually be nobody. Yeah, hey, a Peter Tomasi creation. Damian's friend from his solo series, that's nice to see her back again. Of course, Kathy, being a super powerful alien, is able to pick her out even with her stealth tech, and the two end up butting heads a little bit. Also, Kathy, first off, she had a suit in the previous issue. Now it seems she's picked a superhero moniker, Beacon. Aw, they grow up so fast, don't they? The two girls are arguing when Boy Zorro ends up breaking on through from the other side, and here's the thing, that portal to Bizarro World stays open. Now, when we do check back on in with John in the present, it seems that Boy Zorro has just moved right on in and is making himself at home, even helping himself to some of John's action figures. Damn it, Boy Zorro, those action figures were never supposed to be out of the package. You're decreasing their value. That boy ain't right, I tell ya. Now, as you may have gleaned from the previous issue, Boy Zorro is in something of a rebellious teenage phase right now. He's mad at his stupid dad and wishes he could have a happier, better life like the one John has. Granted, Boy Zorro doesn't exactly put his best foot forward when he does get the chance to meet Superman. He ends up blasting him, assuming he's his own father trying to take him back. Now, while the Man of Steel isn't exactly keen on babysitting Boy Zorro over here, he does realize that he's not exactly bad, just confused and doesn't know the rules of this world. He figures that if he can take him back, maybe he can straighten things out with the kid's parents. And he better hurry too, because at the breach, get this, Bizarro Damian Wayne Robin ends up coming through, and while Main Earth Robin is an emotional cripple, this Bizarro World version has a wispy French mustache, can't stop hitting on everyone and telling them how much he loves them. In fact, he only came to this Earth so he could get back his teammate. They're not the Super Sons, you see, they're the Bizarro Boys. Superman figures that if everyone's all together now, he might as well lead one giant messed up field trip deep into the heart of Bizarro World. In a twist of irony, it would seem that Bizarro, despite all of his abuse in the previous issue, actually was worried about where his son got off to, and when he sees him hanging out with Superman, assumes that the Man of Steel is trying to take his kid from him. This ends up leading to a giant fight wherein the two knock each other around a little bit before eventually knocking Bizarro all the way up to the moon. Superman figures, hey, you know what, in for a penny, out for a pound, I might as well finish this fight with Bizarro before I head back, although I'm sure he was not expecting, though, to end up getting blindsided by Bizarro's arch nemesis, and that would be the Legion of Fun, Bizarro World counterparts to the Legion of Doom. Alrighty then, so picking up from where the previous issue left off, Superman and Bizarro were in the process of beating the ever-loving piss out of one another. We as the reader quickly realize, though, that this is not simply a matter of good versus, well, bizarre anymore. There's actually a lot more at play. Tomasi goes out of his way to let Bizarro have a lot of internal monologue, and we get a good feeling for what's going on in his head right now, and he is not in a good place right now. He is, for all intents and purposes, going through the complete opposite emotional spectrum of what Superman himself was going through after his son was born. Bizarro was feeling angry, confused, detached, so much to the point he stopped going out and actually doing his job as Bizarro, which might explain why his version of the Justice League got captured by that world's Legion of Fun. The final straw, it would seem, was actually getting to see Superman show up with his son in tow, believing that the Man of Steel was trying to take Boy Bizarro away from him. And because the planet of Bizarro World is so utterly tied to Bizarro as a being, if he's out of whack, the whole thing is out of whack. In fact, the whole planet seems to be near exploding soon if the heroes can't do something about it. Now, John Kent the Superboy, as well as his friend Kathy, Beacon, and Nobody also get a good chunk of focus in this issue. You see, they gotta buy Superman time to try and knock some sense into Bizarro, which means they have to go and try and save the Bizarro League from the Legion of Fun. This leads to several truly hilarious encounters. My personal favorite is the Bizarro World version of the Joker, the Crier, who's not funny at all. Or the simple fact that Bizarro World Gorilla Grodd is called Gorilla Odd. Eventually, Clark is able to break on through to Bizarro and talk him into trying to save his own world, and from here, you'd think you would know where the story is gonna go, but they throw some really unexpected curveballs our way. You'll recall Bizarro Lois, the woman for whom Bizarro was getting into all those domestic spats in the previous issue. Well, she basically assumes that Bizarro World is cooked, and because of that, she digs out Bizarro's old rocket with plans of saving herself and her kid. But I guess because love and hate are so truly inverted on Bizarro World, she's not gonna leave without trying to kill Bizarro first. This sets him off, and the whole thing gets really ugly really quickly. Oh, but wait, trying to kill his significant other isn't actually the worst thing Bizarro does in this issue. He's really going for that Worst Dad award. You see, he basically piles on into this rocket before telling his son Boy Bizarro that he never loved him, and then leaves him to die on the exploding planet. Oh, sorry, imploding, because it's Bizarro and everything is backwards. Luckily though, this story does end up having a happy ending, and I of course mean happy in our terms of happy, not Bizarro happy, which would be sad. You see, Superman ends up saving Boy Bizarro and taking him through the portal back to main Earth before the planet's destruction. I mean, hey, that's all well and good and everything, although I get the feeling Lois isn't going to be too happy when you say that you adopted a new kid from Bizarro World.
Alrighty then, so as we join the comic, the Kent family is back in Hamilton County, the place where this whole series started. The paperwork is going through and the final sale on their house is quickly approaching. They're clearing out the last of their belongings and cleaning up the place for the new owner who's coming very soon. John is pretty sad and nostalgic about the whole thing. After all, this was the only home he ever knew for so much of his life. His parents try and tell him not to fret, that change is ultimately a good thing at the end of the day, and that it's the only way we truly grow and evolve as people, by facing adversity and doing things that sometimes feel painful. In fact, pretty much everything about this story is all about letting go, moving on, enjoying the good times. Essentially, the whole house is an allegory for Peter J. Tomasi's time on this book. He himself is having to let it go and move on, like John is having to let it go and move on. This issue also takes time to celebrate how far John the Superboy has come as a character in just the 2 years that he's been written in this series. He remembers how he first learned to fly, how he first accidentally used his heat vision. He remembers all the new friends he's made, like Kathy, even Bizarro Boy, who is currently living in Hamilton County now, along with all the other misfit wayward souls from other planets or other dimensions. Now, unfortunately, the moving trucks are stuck in Metropolis right now because the Justice League is running an important drill. However, it's in moments like this it's good to have a super speedster be just a phone call away, so Barry Allen the Flash decides to help the family out move the last of their stuff. With that out of the way, the Kent family is free to go to the Hamilton County Fair and enjoy it one last time. Again, something they did very early on in this run. Again, they take this opportunity to reconnect with old friends, see how everyone is doing, and at the end of it all, the mayor actually manages to unveil a huge statue honoring not only Superman and all the good work he's done for Hamilton County, but Superboy too. It's at that point the family's nice outing gets shattered by a call from the Justice League. Superman is ready to go, and Lois is used to this by now, but Superboy wants to go along too, and showing Lois's own growth, she decides to let her son join her father, and together they both fly off. Alrighty then, so you may recall quite a few arcs back now, Clark and John had traveled to the mysterious Dinosaur Island, a mysterious place where all the flora and fauna has gone completely Jurassic Park. It's also there they met Captain Storm, a member of the DC World War II team, the Losers. You may remember in 2010 they did a movie version of Andy Diggle's updated version of the concept for Vertigo, or maybe you don't because the movie was super forgettable. Captain Storm had held off off the dinosaur horde so Superman and his son could escape. John can't sleep one night and decides that he can't let this eat at his conscience anymore, so him and his dad Superman decide to break on through to the other side to rescue the captain. Granted, getting back to Dinosaur Island is kinda difficult. They only made it there the first time because Manchester Black was screwing with them and trying to trap them on the island forever. The Man and Boy of Steel managed to show up on the island just in time to save Captain Storm from getting eaten by a bunch of dinosaurs. They do this by quantum leaping right into a T-Rex's guts. Oh sure, it's gross and everything, but I bet it's still not as gross as coconut water. That stuff's just plain disgusting. Now, in the previous story, Captain Storm wasn't ready to leave Dinosaur Island. It's where all of his friends on the Losers died and where they're all currently buried. He has now changed his tone due to the fact that the island has actually gotten worse. Some of the creatures have been eating the dead bodies of World War II soldiers that have landed there, and it's causing them to mutate into some sort of horrible dinosaur-human hybrid. Did I also mention the creatures are zombies too? Because if they bite you, you'll end up growing your own sick lizard limbs, which, you know, is pretty good for Captain Storm because he's missing an eye and a leg. He can't leave without his old team's dog tag, so Superman and Superboy have to do a whole escort mission to take him back to the cave so he can make off with his keepsakes. When they return to our dimension, though, Superman and Superboy go out of their way to help Captain Storm get set up. They get Cyborg's dad to give him a brand new robot leg. He officially gets debriefed for all the work he did during World War II. He even picks up his military pension, which, man, with added interest has really got to have added up by now. He more or less vows to do the Steve Rogers thing right now, travel the highways and byways of America, dropping off the dog tags to the descendants of his old war buddies so their families can have some peace of mind. It's pretty sweet. It's a real shame modern day war comics don't carry the same cachet as the World War II ones do, because if they did, I feel this would be a pretty nice way to kick off a modern day Losers type book. John the Superboy feels good about himself, having wrapped up all the loose ends, as does Superman, helping out a fighting man, you know, a real American hero, if you will. And hey, just to really hit home the idea that this is Peter J. Tomasi's final word on Superman before Brian Michael Bendis comes and takes over, Superman literally closes the bedroom door on the audience as it all ends. And overall, it was a sweet little one-and-done story all about how hard it is to say goodbye sometimes. It's clear to me Peter Tomasi as a creator had an amazing time writing this book, and letting go was probably hard for him, so it's cool to see him work through his own separation anxieties through John. It's also a really rewarding story for everyone who stuck with this book for the 2 years. They managed to bring everything full circle and pay a lot of stuff off. It's a story that reminds us, hey, you can write a good superhero tale without anyone needing to punch anything or get punched in return. In fact, it even goes to some very literary places by giving us some quotes from a famous Robert Frost poem. This was a really big week for Superman, what with the Big Action Comics number 1000 and his overall anniversary, and I gotta say, this one definitely fits in here for the occasion. It's the ending of one amazing chapter and hopefully the beginning of another, because at the end of the day, that's the true magic of Superman and superhero comics in general. The book is never closed for long. Every run is part of a bigger tapestry. What does the future and Brian Michael Bendis have in store for the Superman book? I don't know yet, but you know, when it comes, I'll be here to tell you all about it.